The Sakuragaka festival has reached its finale, and now the cleanup begins. An official notice requires all students to work together to clear the school grounds, and they dutifully begin bagging the leftover trash. Amidst the bustling activity, a teacher casually delegates a share of the work, announcing he'll leave the garbage sorting to the students before walking off. The result is a mountain of refuse. It was decided in a meeting that the students themselves would be responsible for sorting all of it. A young man with dark hair clenches a piece of trash, his face hardening with resentment at the decision. His defiance earns him a sharp reprimand. While being restrained, he's told that rules are rules. A teacher announces extra classes and preparations for evening celebrations. An hour later, the same young man is still working when a stern teacher with a mustache shouts at him to stop complaining and do his job. As the teacher calls him pathetic, his expression suddenly shifts to one of pure terror as dark, violent energy erupts from the ground beneath him. A blinding flash of white light engulfs the schoolyard. The world itself seems to fracture, the school buildings shattering into abstract planes against the overwhelming brightness. When the light fades, a massive, perfectly circular chasm is all that remains where a portion of the school once stood, its edges unnaturally clean and deep. The young man stares, sweat dripping down his face, his eyes wide with the shock of witnessing the impossible. He finds himself in a different place entirely, standing among a vast, silent crowd of students and adults. Confusion ripples through them. He wonders where he is, remembering he was just in class. A mysterious voice suddenly echoes, addressing all those who find themselves on the border of the worlds. The voice, speaking over the image of a butterfly, delivers a harsh truth. They were forcibly torn from their world and can only blame their own misfortune. It continues its proclamation to the terrified students. In this new world, they will face superior beings, both people and creatures. Among them are geniuses and fools, but for all of them, the way back is permanently blocked. They are here to learn how truly weak they are. As the displaced students and staff stood in shock, a voice echoed around them, explaining their new reality. Their bodies would undergo a metamorphosis, allowing them to understand the languages of this new world. Each would receive a sword to protect themselves and their allies, along with a small measure of power as a reward for their survival thus far. One young man with dark hair looked on with dread, while another, with light spiky hair, clenched his fist with a look of grim determination. The voice continued, advising them to think carefully, with all their hearts, about what they wanted most, hinting that a strong desire could be a source of help. But before they could process this, chaos erupted. Shadowy forms lunged, and students scattered in terror. From a distance, an older man watched the pandemonium, callously wondering if the students would simply disappear. In the midst of the fray, the light-haired student moved with purpose. He ignored the monstrous threats and instead lunged at the dark-haired man, violently seizing an object from him. The man, a janitor, could only watch in stunned disbelief as his power was stolen. His loss was immediate and absolute. A dark, consuming energy swirled around the janitor as the horrifying realization struck him. Without his sword, he would die. He demanded its return, but the student merely held the prize, a faint smirk on his face. The janitor's shock curdled into pure, desperate rage. He roared, his voice cracking with the primal need for survival, screaming for the student to give it back. Watching from a safe distance, another student with glasses identified the thief. It was Hayato Ichihara. He noted, dismissing him as a supercilious and spoiled brat, the son of some big shot. The older man who had been observing the chaos approached. He looked down on the powerless janitor with a cruel smirk, confirming his lowly status. "Janitor," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Yeah, it sucks to be you." He clutched the faint light that remained in his hand, a useless remnant. The janitor understood with chilling clarity that this was his own struggle for life and death. No one was coming to help him. He was utterly alone. His isolation gave way to overwhelming dread. He hated this, hated his weakness. Death was no longer an abstract concept. It was on his doorstep. The question consumed him. I gonna die? As his spirit broke, he reached out his trembling hands, his mind screaming a final, desperate question to the uncaring world. Why am I the one who has to die? In that moment of ultimate despair, a single delicate butterfly fluttered into view before him. He felt his consciousness fading, a single, bitter question echoing in the darkness of his mind. Why did it always have to be him? The feeling of despair began to consume him entirely, a swirling abyss pulling him under. As his life ebbed away, his final thoughts drifted toward a simple wish. He no longer wanted to communicate with people. If he had a choice, he would prefer to be in a desert or snowy mountains, a place where he could peacefully draw. But beneath that resignation, a primal instinct clawed its way to the surface, a single, powerful declaration cutting through the gloom. He wanted to live. In the next instant, the darkness was shattered by a blinding white light. He found himself standing in the very landscape he had just imagined, a vast, desolate, snow-covered mountain range. The sudden transport leaving him utterly stunned. His shock quickly turned to terror. He was not alone. On the surrounding cliffs, massive, powerful beasts regarded him with predatory eyes, forces far superior to him. One of the creatures let out a deafening roar, sending a shockwave of snow and ice blasting through the air. The bitter cold bit deep, and he cursed, realizing he might freeze to death before the beasts even reached him. As he stumbled through the snow, his hand brushed against something hard. It was a book. A brief flicker of hope that he could use it for a fire was extinguished by the fact that he had no matches. The only thing it could warm, he thought grimly, was his brain. He opened it, and was stunned to find he could read the strange script. It was a book of spells. One entry described how to block an entrance with a wall of rocks. With the beasts closing in, he decided it couldn't hurt to try. Clutching the book, he scrambled toward the small cave opening and raised his hand. With newfound determination, he focused his will and bellowed the words of power. "Hear me, stone." He is thrown backward by a tremendous force, his body slamming into the unforgiving rock. Dazed, he can only wonder what happened to his strength. As darkness encroaches on his vision, he feels his consciousness begin to fade. Through his failing senses, a monstrous shape resolves itself from the swirling snow. A massive, bear-like beast with glowing, predatory eyes. He lies motionless on the frozen ground, oblivious to a new threat that has joined the hunt. A massive, tiger-like creature with enormous fangs lets out a guttural roar, poised to attack. But beneath them, the very earth begins to stir. Suddenly, the ground shatters, erupting upwards in a maelstrom of jagged stone. The spell, though delayed, has found its mark. A grotesque, multi-eyed creature is caught in a violent eruption, its dark carapace pierced and crushed by the stone pillars. In a dark, rocky cavern, the young man groans, slowly pushing himself up from the dusty ground. He gets to his feet and sees a smooth, newly formed wall sealing the cave entrance, a faint light seeping through a crack. Nearby, an old book lies open. He places a hand on the strange surface, wondering if he was the one who created it. Realizing this must be what magic can do. The truth settles in with chilling certainty as he stares into the light. Magic is real in this world. Now outside, he finds himself alone in a vast, snowy mountain range. Clutching the grimoire, he resolves that he will not die here. His first priority is to understand his surroundings. As he surveys the desolate landscape, a large, spotted feline appears on a nearby ridge, its form stark against the snow. This world is home to many spirits: flame, water, ice, lightning, wind, stone, light, and darkness. To receive their power, one must call upon them and offer a sacrifice of their own magical power, an energy that is, in essence, life itself. He sits down to study the book. Learning this practice is called spiritual magic. He marvels that he can read the strange letters, a language he has never seen before. A sudden shiver reminds him of the biting cold. He needs to warm up. Holding the book, he focuses his will and calls out, "Hear me, flame." His call is met with a violent backlash. The book explains that for an inexperienced sorcerer, there can be problems when sacrificing magical power. In an instant, his energy is completely siphoned away, throwing him backward onto the snow. He lies on the ground, groaning from strain. The grimoire details that if the outflow of magical energy isn't precisely controlled, the mage can suffer from headaches, fatigue, and even loss of consciousness. However, it also notes a benefit. By repeatedly emptying one's magic, a user can learn to recognize the spirits and increase the core of their own power. With renewed determination, he tries again, shouting for the flame. His desperate cries echo across the frozen peaks, but his strength fails him. The book slips from his grasp as he collapses, defeated, into the snow. He collapses, bewildered by his circumstances, realizing that the wall he created was a fluke and his own power is insufficient. As the cold seeps in, a sharp pang of hunger grips him, his stomach rumbling loudly. Rummaging through his belongings, he finds a small, wrapped food item, hoping it's edible. Without hesitation, he tears into the food, devouring it ravenously. He chokes for a moment, but continues to eat, then grabs a small barrel and gulps down its contents to quench his thirst. His immediate hunger sated, he examines the strange food item more closely. To his astonishment, he discovers a massive stockpile of the same provisions, along with numerous barrels. A quick calculation brings a stark realization. He has enough to last for a year. With the threat of starvation averted, he turns his attention back to the biting cold. Standing at the entrance of his cave shelter, he once again reaches out with his will, calling upon the spirit of flame. His desperate plea, "Hear me, flame," echoes across the vast, snow-covered mountains. The desolate landscape is silent, marked only by the frozen carcass of a great beast. The call travels far, reaching a massive snow leopard resting near the carcass. The great cat's eye opens slightly, its gaze calm and intelligent, acknowledging the disturbance in the air. Finally, his persistence yields a result. A tiny, fragile flame flickers into existence above a rock. He cups his hands around it, a look of profound relief and fierce determination spreading across his face. This small victory fuels his resolve. He reflects on his past, a life so different from this brutal reality, and makes a solemn vow. He will not die, even if the entire world rises against him. He commits himself wholly to this vow. Days are spent poring over the grimoire, practicing his newfound abilities and learning the fundamentals of survival. He must learn everything he can, try everything possible, and survive at any cost. His tireless efforts transform the cold cave. A large, roaring fire now blazes within, casting dancing shadows on the walls and providing a stable source of warmth and light. He had secured his foothold in this harsh, new world he had endured. Within his stone shelter, he had fashioned a life, creating a table and even a toilet from the rock. A knife scraped another mark on the wall, tallying 181 days past. His hair and beard had grown long and wild over the months. As he stood at the cave's entrance, he noticed a change in the air. The relentless storm had finally stopped. With the blizzard's end, he turned his attention back to his training, commanding the stone to hear him. Then, taking his knife, he sheared off the matted hair that had grown over the long months of isolation. Stepping out from the confines of his long imprisonment, he emerged into the vast, open world, the light of a new day washing over him. He stood upon a snowy precipice, gazing at the towering peaks. In the mountains, he reflected, there were no wages to worry about, no false sense of pride or crushing inferiority to contend with. Here, one could live purely for the sake of life itself. His contemplation was cut short by the appearance of a magnificent creature. It was one of the magical beasts his grimoire had mentioned. He recalled the book's definition. These were not mere monsters. A magical beast was a creature that had combined the power of spirits with its own life force, a product of successful spiritual evolution. As he observed the beast, he considered his own situation. If it were a simple monster, he might already be dead. But he felt strangely light, almost unnaturally so, after being confined for so long. His body suddenly moved with an explosive burst of speed. The beast lunged, but he was already gone, leaping away from the crushing impact. He couldn't believe it. He was moving impossibly fast, fleeing from the pursuing predator. He scrambled up a steep incline, yet he wasn't out of breath. He had taken no damage from hitting the rock during his escape, not even a scratch. He paused, looking back in disbelief as the beast stared him down from its perch, wondering what it was looking at. He turned away from the creature, a new resolve hardening his expression. He vowed that someday, he would be strong enough to tie its tail in a knot, to test the powers surging through him. He drew back his fist and struck a nearby boulder. The rock exploded into fragments, a testament to his incredible new strength. He clenched his fist, feeling the surge of his newfound power. With this strength, he could finally hunt for real food, rabbits, mice, anything. The thought of eating meat filled him with a grim determination. But his planning was cut short by the sudden appearance of a monstrous, multi-eyed creature covered in sharp spikes, looming over him. His eyes widened in disbelief. It was a spider, but its size was unnatural, impossibly huge. Without a second thought, he turned and fled as the colossal beast gave chase, its massive legs crashing down and shattering the earth where he had just stood. As he scrambled to evade the monster's relentless assault, a black streak of motion blurred past him. The snow leopard, moving with impossible speed, slammed directly into the giant spider, unleashing a devastating impact that tore through the creature's armored body. The battle was over in an instant. The colossal spider lay in pieces, utterly destroyed. He stood before the wreckage, his expression hardening as he processed the sheer, overwhelming power of the magical beast. His attention was drawn away from the carnage. The snow leopard stood nearby, casually dropping the carcass of a large boar it had just killed. The beast turned its head, looking at him with an unnerving, inquisitive gaze. Ignoring him completely, the leopard padded towards a large opening in the mountainside. He cried out in protest, realizing it was heading for the cave he had claimed as his own. The beast paid him no mind, disappearing into the darkness as its glowing eyes stared back from within. He was left alone once more, a small figure standing in a vast, snowy expanse, staring at the dark entrance now occupied by the formidable creature. The sun set and the stars emerged, but he did not move. Through the long, cold night, he remained rooted to the spot, his gaze fixed on the cave. Shivering in the biting wind, his resolve only hardened. He had to get inside. He had to find a way. Then the ground beneath him began to tremble and shift. The entire mountainside started to rise, revealing the cave to be the mouth of a colossal, living turtle, its stony shell mistaken for a cliff face. He was standing on the back of a creature the size of a mountain. He had no time to react as the snow leopard's immense tail whipped around, striking him with brutal force. The impact sent him hurtling through the air, his body ragdolling from the sheer power of the blow as he was flung from the colossal turtle's head. The powerful appendage then retreated, disappearing back into the cavernous darkness of the den. After tumbling across the rough surface of the turtle's shell, he finally managed to halt his momentum. Gritting his teeth, a look of fierce determination replaced the shock on his face. His gaze was fixed on a new, even greater threat. The snow leopard had not discarded him. Instead, it had placed him upon its head, facing down a colossal, saber-toothed beast. The newcomer bared its massive fangs, challenging the leopard for its territory, its kill, or perhaps the small human it now carried. The roar of a massive snow leopard echoes, its fangs bared in a fearsome display. Below, a young man stares up, his face a mask of pure terror as the beast snarls. The massive predator looms over him, but his attention is drawn to a much smaller version of the creature, a cub, playfully swatting at his shoulder. His fear gives way to confusion as the small creature latches onto his arm. The great beast settles, its massive body curling around him. He is completely enveloped in its thick, spotted fur, wondering what its intentions could possibly be. Despite the strange turn of events, a single thought dominates his mind. He must get away from his predator, or he will surely become its next meal. Yet, as he remains hidden, an unexpected sensation washes over him. The warmth of the fur is profound, a comfort he realizes he hasn't felt in a very long time. Having emerged into the light of morning, he finds himself on the ground, facing the small cub. He asks it where its parent is, as the adult leopard watches him intently from short distance. The cub leads him deeper into a vast, sunlit cavern. Before them lies an astonishing sight, a massive, lotus-like formation cradling countless large, smooth stones. He is left speechless, silently questioning where on earth they are. He explores the cavern further, discovering signs of habitation, a lit fire, supplies. The realization dawns on him that this is not just a cave, but a predator's den. Outside, the great leopard soars through the sky, its powerful body propelled forward. Strange, crystalline fruits or gems are now attached to its long tail. The beast lands with surprising grace. The young man watches, his expression unreadable, as he processes the impossible fact. This creature can fly. He stood inside the cavern, his eyes fixed on a rough-hewn wall that hadn't been there before. It dawned on him that the giant cat must have created it, but he could not fathom why. As if sensing his confusion, the massive feline turned its head, its gaze meeting his. Without warning, the creature bounded past him and launched itself from the precipice, soaring into the open sky. Left alone, he sat on the edge of the den, a grim thought crossing his mind. Was he simply being kept here as a food reserve for the coming winter? His dark thoughts were interrupted by a tender scene. The mother leopard had returned and was gently nuzzling her small cub. As he watched them from a short distance, a book open in his hands, a new understanding settled in. He mused that the mother would likely take care of them both. Later, while he rested on the cavern floor, the curious cub clambered onto his chest. It began to poke insistently at his face, try to rouse him. He had grown accustomed to this strange family. Now, he sat just outside the den's entrance as the small cub played near him, all under the watchful eye of its powerful mother, who rested a short distance away. He watched another moment of affection between mother and child, the massive leopard's eyes soft as it nuzzled its offspring. His own expression was calm, a quiet intensity in his gaze as he observed their bond. The quiet moment was broken by a playful act. The mother leopard casually tossed her cub into the air, and he reacted instantly, catching the small, airborne creature in his arms. His attention was then drawn back to the mother. Her entire body was now covered in the strange, dark, crystalline objects. With a sudden surge of energy, she unleashed them in a massive, concussive blast that erupted across the snowy landscape. The force of the explosion threw him onto the leopard's back as she bounded away. He looked over his shoulder at the smoking crater, stunned by the display of power. In the distance, through the haze, he spotted small figures and realized with a shock that they were human. The figures were a company of heavily armed soldiers. At their head stood a formidable, bearded commander clad in thick plate armor, holding a massive shield. As they surveyed the battlefield, the snow leopard, with its passenger, made its escape from a nearby cliff. He stared down his quarry, his expression hard as stone, and gave the order, "Fire." In response, the snow leopard unleashed another volley of its explosive crystals. It moved with blinding speed, forcing the soldiers to cry out in alarm. A commander yelled for the archers to get back, realizing they were outmatched by the creature's swiftness. As the soldiers scrambled, a mage conjured a crystalline shield of ice to intercept the attack. The leopard, undeterred, crashed through their lines, only to be met by the commander's heavy mace swinging in a powerful arc. His blow landed with crushing force, yet the beast endured. The commander, eyes wide with grim respect, questioned if the creature had shielded itself with frost cover. He acknowledged its fearsome reputation as the white ghost of the Alurpkian Mountains, admitting it would be an insult to expect anything less. The leopard answered with a ferocious roar. From his vantage point, the young man could only watch as the incredible battle unfolded. The scene before him was not one of simple violence, but something more akin to an epic painting brought to life. The awe quickly soured. A familiar, bitter feeling washed over him as he realized that once again, reality was delivering a harsh blow, just as it had in his previous life. He remembered how society had rejected him, and how even in this new world, his sword had been taken from him, leaving him powerless. This reality was cruel and harsh. The mother leopard fought with desperate fury, her small cub watching the life-or-death struggle from the sidelines. His gaze fell upon the terrified cub. A desperate question formed in his mind, directed at the mother. He wondered why she didn't simply flee, why she chose to stand and fight against such overwhelming odds. He looked from the cub back to the battle, understanding that the small creature was powerless, able to do nothing but watch. In that moment, he saw himself. The cub turned its head, its gaze meeting his. A new resolve hardened his features. If this weak, defenseless cub wouldn't run, then neither would he. He stands beside the snow leopard, his expression hardened with resolve. The great cat is a steady presence at his side, its spotted tail curling behind him as they face their shared enemy together. He declares aloud that he will no longer run from this thorny reality. Across the clearing, the bearded commander watches this defiance with a grimace, vowing that he will not take his eyes off what is happening. The snow leopard lets out a defiant roar. With a furious cry, The beast lunges forward, a blur of white and black spots. The commander braces behind his massive shield as another soldier moves to intercept the charging feline. A violent explosion of dark energy erupts at the point of impact, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. As the dust settles, a soldier frantically reports that the white ghost is still alive, but his captain sharply orders him to be quiet. The leopard stands amidst the devastation, its eyes glowing with rage. From a high cliff overlooking the chaos, a lone figure is silhouetted against the sky. A voice echoes, stating that the true ruler of the Alardurian Mountains is already dead. The silhouette reveals itself to be a colossal, shadowy wolf, its form dissolving like smoke on the wind. The scene shifts. The bearded commander kneels, expressing his relief that the dangerous task was completed without losses. He gives his thanks to a young woman in armor, crediting her gift of spirits for their success and addressing her as Missy Hero. Maxim Dahl, the giant captain of the hunting group, White Spear, holds Akari Fudishiro, a summoned hero, in a powerful grip. He declares it's been 50 years since he's had such an exciting hunt and thanks her for the experience. Noticing her downcast expression, he asks why she looks so sad. Akari, a former high school student, apologizes, admitting that all she did during the hunt was run away. Nearby, the young man in the work jacket observes them, noting that their clothes, while different, seem familiar, leading him to assume other students must be in the area. Maxim explains to him that the beast they hunted can only be challenged 3 days after a long winter, making the hunt itself a high praise. The young man acknowledges that Akari's power, her gift of spirits, is a useful tool for any hunter, allowing them to know the location of their prey. Her ability, Unstable Map, analyzes the terrain to create a mental map where hostile creatures are marked in red. She looks down, ashamed, explaining that her ability is unstable and sometimes marks harmless creatures like rabbits and mice as enemies. She laments that she isn't fit to be a hero. The young man realizes she was given this power specifically to locate her enemies. Maxim interjects, telling Akari that if she cannot use her powers correctly, she must train constantly and learn to trust the experience of an old hunter like himself. As the hunting party rests on a mountain pass, he bellows at his soldiers, calling them lazy and asking if they've rested enough. Akari cautions him that while they are all strong, they must remain on alert, but she concedes that giving them a moment to rest their consciousness is a great help. With renewed vigor, he roars that it's time to descend the mountains, rallying his men with promises of delicious drinks and even tastier girls in the town below. His soldiers respond with weary acceptance. Akari watches him, thinking he sounds like a sailor from a bygone era. He turns to Akari, confused by her thoughtful expression, and tells her not to pretend to be a great thinker. She informs him that the wind spirits are acting strangely. He seems to understand her meaning. Following her gaze, the young man sees the hunting party moving away across a series of rock pillars. Akari points, stating there is someone in that direction. He asks if they are marked in red, and she confirms they are. He dismisses it, saying it's no longer their concern. On a nearby ledge, the large snow leopard watches them. The snow leopard pads across the desolate, rocky landscape, its eyes wide and alert. Watching from a distance, the young man decides it is time for him to leave as well. He finds shelter in a cave, sitting alone as he watches the sun rise or set between 2 distant peaks, lost in thought. His solitude is broken. He now cradles a small snow leopard cub, which affectionately licks his chin. As he walks away with the cub in his arms, the adult snow leopard watches from a short distance, making no move to intervene. He looks down at the small snow leopard cub, now swaddled in his own jacket and a towel. He knows that at this point, all the creature needs is food and rest. To that end, he sits by a fire, carving a piece of meat from a large carcass and roasting it over the flames. With the cub resting in his lap, he takes a large, satisfying bite of the cooked meat, savoring a taste he has missed dearly. His own hunger sated, he worries the cub might starve. He offers it a piece, but quickly realizes the meat is too tough for the young animal. An idea strikes him, and he begins preparing a stew in a pot, using a stone to help grind the ingredients. Once the meat has softened in the stew, he takes a piece, cools it down, and mashes it between his fingers into a soft paste. He carefully feeds the paste to the cub, who eats it eagerly. Relieved, he decides he will continue to feed it this way until it can handle solid food. The cub rests peacefully on the pelt of its mother. As he watches the small creature, a realization dawns on him. He finally understands what the adult leopard wanted. It had trusted him to take care of its child. A few days pass, and the cub grows more energetic, making life inconvenient without a name. He wonders if it's male or female, but decides it doesn't matter and names it Kuro. The cub promptly swats him. He tries Shiro, then Tama, each suggestion earning him another playful smack. Holding the growing feline up, he offers one last name, Yukishiro. The creature seems to approve. He smiles, telling the cub it's a fitting name. And so, their life together began on such a dubious note. The short summer flew by almost unnoticed. Together, he and Yukishiro learned to survive, fighting giant spiders and avoiding poisonous flora. They successfully endured their second winter in the wilderness. He treks through the vast, snow-covered mountain range, his voice carrying on the wind as he calls out for his companion, Yukishiro. In response, the now fully grown snow leopard appears atop a rocky outcrop, a fresh kill in its jaws. Spring had come. Yukishiro drops the small catch, and Kurando thanks him for his hard work. As they stand together, surveying their domain, Yukishiro suddenly tenses, its gaze fixed on something in the distance. Noticing the change, Kurando asks his partner what's wrong. Far below, a large, heavily equipped party makes its way through the snowy woods. One of its members observes that a certain big guy is nowhere to be found, and that their group's composition is different this time. The focus settles on a young woman with dark hair, Akari Fujishiro. She grips her sword, her breath misting in the cold, and wonders if her wind spirit ability will be effective this time. Their leader, a man with long, light-colored hair named Sol Damatal Bragoi, commands the group to hurry, declaring their hunt must end in 3 days. He turns to Akari, mockingly calling her hero and questioning her search for the snow leopard. He coldly informs her that they brought her, a cowardly bastard from Loran, for a specific purpose, and that she will be collecting the corpses of her comrades on the way back. Sol then rallies his own men, proclaiming that the Aladurian Mountains once belonged to the Dalgan people, who were the true mountain hunters. He boasts of their history of bravely exterminating monsters and dismisses the Laurentians as weak. His followers erupt in cheers, hailing him as the pride of Dalgan. As the Dalgans march onward, filled with nationalist pride, Akari trails behind them. Her expression is downcast as she silently questions why she was the one to receive such an ability. Her mind flashes to the pressures of her role. A successful hunt means praise from smiling, faceless crowds, while failure results in endless jeering and condemnation. She compares this to her old life in Japan, where she felt invisible. Here, she is cherished and branded a hero, but she realizes that in the end, she is simply being used by everyone. The thought overwhelms her, and she admits to herself, "I'm so tired of it." As Kurando walks through the snow with the great leopard Yukishiro, he reflects on the nature of the world. No matter where one goes, discrimination and societal pride seem to follow, pitting groups like the Loran and the Dalgan against one another. He now understands that the leopard hunt is an annual event. His time living in the mountains with Yukishiro has taught him much, especially that the winter snowstorms are so severe that any attempt to traverse the peaks is akin to suicide. Because of this, people rarely venture into these territories. Kurando has formed a theory about the local ecosystem. The snow leopards and the giant spiders that emerge in the summer have a clear territorial division, with the spiders not daring to go any higher. He calculates that if they can just hold out for 3 days, they won't see any hunters for another year. However, he knows it's possible to awaken the spiders even in winter, which would cause them to emerge for a 3-day period. His thoughts turn to the hunters who killed Yukishiro's mother, a beast who lacked the strength to overcome them. He dismisses the idea of setting traps, knowing an amateur like himself could never fool an experienced hunter. The greatest problem is Akari Fujishiro. As long as she is with the hunting party, Yukishiro's natural camouflage and terrain advantages are completely useless, making them easy to find. He considers his other options. An attack after dark is impossible, as his night vision is no better than any other person's. Using magic is a possibility, but he hesitates, admitting to himself that he cannot control it well. His eyes narrow as he visualizes the approaching threat, the confident Sol, the hero Akari, and the rest of their hunting party. But a sudden thought cuts through his strategic planning. He questions himself, wondering why he was even trying to find a way to escape with minimal bloodshed. The realization dawns on him. He is not on the side of the people, represented by the armed hunters, nor does he truly belong on the side of the magical beasts. His purpose solidifies as he gazes at the small cub. He is on Yukishiro's side. His only duty is to ensure the cub's protection. With his decision made, Kurando's expression hardens. He speaks softly, addressing the cub by name. "Hey, Yukishiro." He finishes his thought with a chilling proposition. It is time to play with the spiders. His words conjure the image of the monstrous arachnid, a creature of nightmare with a spiky carapace and a cluster of unblinking, white eyes, stirring in the darkness. A large party of hunters, known as the Dalgan, traverses a snowy mountain pass. Their leader, Sol, spots a lone snow leopard perched on a high ridge. A smirk crosses his face as he identifies it as a convenient prey. The great cat stares back, its expression impassive. Irritated by its calm demeanor, Sol scoffs and dismisses it as an easy target, shouting to his men to kill it. The hunters surge forward in a wave of steel and fur. Their hunt is successful. The men roar in triumph around the fallen beast, celebrating their prowess. They declare that this kill is all the proof needed to show that Dalgan is home to the strongest hunters. But their celebration is violently interrupted. The very ground beneath their feet erupts, shattering snow and rock as a colossal, armored creature bursts forth from the earth. The hunters recoil in shock. Sol's face contorts with a sudden, horrifying realization that they have been fooled. It was a trap. The rocky perch they stood on was, in fact, the back of a gigantic, multi-eyed spider. One of his men cries out, begging him not to provoke the beast. It is too late. The monster descends upon them, its massive limbs sowing chaos and death. Bodies are flung through the air as the hunting party is torn apart. A subordinate screams to Sol that at this rate, they will all be annihilated. His warning is heeded, but not with courage. Sol makes a cold calculation, declaring that there is plenty of fodder for the creature. He and a select few turn and flee, deciding that the others will serve to buy them time. As the survivors abandon their comrades, Akari Fujishiro is left behind. She stands alone before the colossal spider, its gaping maw and countless eyes filling her vision. Her face is a mask of pure terror. A single, desperate thought echoes in her mind. I want to go home. The terrifying scene vanishes. She finds herself sitting in a tranquil, snowy expanse under a sky brilliant with stars. Nearby, a young man, Kurando, looks up and speaks into the quiet night. Welcome back, Yukishiro. The snow leopard, Yukishiro, emerges from the darkness, now revealed to be immense. It gently carries an unconscious Kurando by the collar of his shirt and lays him down beside Akari. As she cradles him, his eyes slowly flutter open. He found himself in a disorienting memory, walking through the familiar halls of a school with a stack of books in his arms. A female student offered a cheerful good morning, to which he could only manage a mumbled, hesitant reply. The vision shattered, returning him to the cold reality where he held the armored girl, Akari. The great leopard, Yukishiro, stood nearby. He noted that she seemed to have grown, but also looked completely exhausted. His eyes shot open, the shock of his circumstances finally registering. His consciousness returned fully, and he sat up with a start. He wondered aloud if he had somehow survived. Looking around the cavern, his confusion mounted as he questioned where he was and what had become of the spider. His gaze then fell upon the massive snow leopard, and finally on Akari. Their eyes met across the den. A flash of recognition crossed her face as she exclaimed in surprise, identifying him not by name, but by his former role, Janitor-san. As they sat before a fire he had conjured, a small flame still dancing in his palm, she stared in disbelief. She demanded to know how he had learned to use magic. He seemed flustered by the question. She pressed further, asking if he had found a spell book. Looking down and fiddling with his tie, he simply confirmed that he had found a book. Akari's focus shifted to their massive companion, asking why the snow leopard had saved her. Kurando corrected her, explaining that the beast had actually dragged him there. His tone then hardened as he turned the question back on her, asking if she hadn't come to these mountains specifically to hunt it. He pressed the point, stating that her goal wasn't just to catch it, but to kill it. Akari's eyes widened in shock. He told her not to be surprised, revealing that he had seen and heard everything, including her actions from the previous year. Stunned, she deflected with an accusation of her own, demanding to know if he was the one who released the spiky spider. He calmly replied that he also knew about her ability, and that she was the main reason hunters had begun to appear in the area. His mind drifted to a past lesson about how it's easier for the weak to run from danger alone than in a pair. Returning to the present, he apologized to Akari, admitting it had been a long time since he'd spoken to anyone and that he often thought about his home, Japan. He continues his explanation while resting a hand on Yukishiro's back, clarifying that he cannot simply resort to force. No one would come to his aid, and if he were to harm his offender, the authorities would brand him the culprit and imprison him. He apologizes, admitting he got carried away. Akari, still not understanding his point, presses him on why killing the hunters was necessary when they could have simply fled. He counters with a question of his own. What would one do if thieves broke into their home? The answer, he asserts, is to fight back. Akari challenges his logic, questioning if he truly prioritizes a beast's life over a human's. He promises her an answer. As he speaks, Yukishiro pads away from his side, moving deeper into the cave to rejoin its family. Akari watches as the snow leopards nuzzle each other, a quiet family reunited in the safety of their den. The weight of his next words falls heavily upon her. He reveals that he knows about her unique ability, the very power that is the main reason for the appearance of hunters. A painful realization dawns on Akari. If she hadn't led the hunters to the snow leopard's den, none of this suffering would have occurred. She turns and walks away, acknowledging the truth in his words. The hunters' deaths were her fault, and she has no right to judge him. The thought crosses her mind that she, too, might one day be forced to kill. The ease with which he takes a life, without hesitation, is terrifying to her. Outside the cave, she watches as Yukishiro bounds across the vast, snowy expanse, effortlessly hunting its prey. In that moment, she understands. The truth of this world crystallizes in her mind. It is all so simple. To live, one must survive. As this thought settles, Kurando emerges from the cave, walking towards her. She calls out his title, Janitor-san, and he stops, his expression unreadable in the stark mountain light. She looks him in the eye and asks the question that has been weighing on her. Is he going to kill her, too? He answers with a simple no, telling her she is free to leave, provided she remains silent about what has happened. He turns his back, muttering that he doesn't know how to talk to children and sees no reason to learn now. As he walks away, leaving her alone on the snowy pass, she quietly thinks to herself what a crude idiot he is, before turning to make her own way down the mountain. She continued her journey, reflecting on Kurando's unique perception. The path back to the city should be simple, she reasoned, because spiders are considered enemies, meaning their webs would also be marked in red, making them easy to avoid. Her thoughts delved deeper into his reality. She had seen people turn red many times, but for Kurando, there was no distinction. Both spiders and people glowed with the same hostile light. The thought of being surrounded by enemies, of seeing everyone as a threat, was deeply unsettling. Deciding it was an unnecessary burden, she resolved to put it out of her mind. Putting those thoughts aside, she crested a snowy ridge. Below her, nestled in a valley, lay the city. A wave of relief washed over her as she realized she was finally almost there. Her relief shattered in an instant. A blinding crimson light erupted from the settlement below. Her eyes widened in horror as the realization struck her. The entire city was burning, glowing a brilliant, terrifying red. Kneeling in the snow, Akari Fujishiro is overcome with despair, wondering what she should do now that the town is completely lost. A few days later, Kurando and the snow leopard Yukishiro travel through the same desolate, snowy landscape. Kurando's expression grim. She rises and walks toward them, her white cloak tattered. As she approaches, Kurando recognizes her with a start. Her face is streaked with dirt and tears as she, in turn, recognizes the janitor. The three now stand together, a silent party against the vast, unforgiving mountain range. She leads them toward the gates of a nearby town, remarking that it has been a long time since he has encountered so many people. Deciding there is no point in complaining, he tells the still despondent Akari that going there might be beneficial. Later that night, within the town's walls, he stands before a shadowy stain on a wooden fence. With a faint smile, Kurando holds out his hand and issues a command, "Hear me, darkness." In response, a hulking, shadowy figure emerges and walks down a street, drawing wary glances from the local populace. The large man is immediately accosted by a townsman, who glares at him with fury and shouts for him to go back to his own country, declaring he is sick of watching it. Later, in a room cluttered with empty tankards, the hulking figure is confronted by an armored woman wielding a massive axe. She asks if he is a killer, which he denies. She reveals she followed him from the tavern and presents a note, questioning if he came at Akari's request. The man recognizes Akari's symbols, but doesn't understand them. The woman presses him, asking if he believes her now, pointing to the note which reads, "Don't rush." Inside a cluttered room, the hulking, bearded man named Maxim confronts Kurando, illuminating him with a torch. He states that Kurando snuck into his home and hid in the darkness, concluding he must be either a thief or a killer. Maxim continues his assessment, noting that while Kurando looks messy, he is human and doesn't seem to be a vagrant. More importantly, he senses no evil intentions from him. Kurando, in turn, asks if he has calmed down enough to get to the point. Annoyed, Maxim demands his name. Kurando simply replies, "John." The giant is skeptical, asking if he just came up with that, but lets it be. He introduces himself as Maxim, a giant, and warns John not to try and trick him. Internally, Kurando is relieved to learn that Akari is alive and well for the time being. His patience wearing thin, Maxim suddenly grabs Kurando by his coat and hoists him into the air, threatening to kill him. Unfazed, Kurando looks down at him with a placid expression and sarcastically remarks on how frightening the situation is. Releasing him, Maxim explains what's happening in the town. A local big shot named Sol encountered the White Ghost and lost nearly his entire squad. Sol survived and testified that Akari was the one who set a spider monster on them, leading to a bounty being placed on her head. Maxim grimly adds that in this country of hunters, betrayal is not forgiven. Kurando realizes the situation is a dead end. All authority in the town belongs to veteran hunters, particularly the arrogant Sol and his gang. He concludes that Akari is innocent and must testify at the guild to defend herself. He then asks Maxim why he drinks so much. The giant explains that he spends his days protesting at the guild and his nights thinking about how to survive until the next day, admitting that his brain works on alcohol. Maxim turns the questions back on him, asking who John is to Akari and what his goal is. The question makes Kurando reflect on how Akari has been left completely alone in this world, without any support at all. His thoughts drift to a memory of Akari crying. When asked about his goal, he answers plainly, "I just want a peaceful life." Maxim considers this. He tells Kurando that while he doesn't know who he is or where he's from, he will take him to Akari. But in return, Kurando must promise to never tell anyone about him. Kurando agrees to the terms. He confirmed Akari's location for the giant, Maxim, one of the Alerpian mountains, known as the habitat of white ghosts. Maxim observed that Kurando's respect for promises marked him as a true hunter, unlike those who break their word. As they prepared to leave immediately from the rooftops, Kurando wondered what to do about the guards below. He then expressed his surprise that someone had managed to pass through the web of large spiny spiders, a feat even dogged hunters couldn't manage, before realizing that Akari was also capable of such a thing. Their solution became clear on the ground, where piles of unconscious guards lay strewn about. Maxim, carrying a large sack, declared it should be enough. Seeing that they were not permitted to exit through the main gates, Kurando suggested a more direct approach. They would jump. In response, Maxim invoked a spell, life force magic, strengthening, his body surging with power. He offered to find Kurando a steed, but instead launched himself into the air, clearing the high town wall in a single, mighty leap. Kurando followed, landing gracefully on the other side. Having landed, the giant looked back with a bead of sweat on his brow, impressed by his companion's effortless agility. They had successfully escaped the town and now ventured into the wilderness beyond. Their journey led them high into the snowy peaks. There, perched on a rocky ledge before a dark cave, a massive snow leopard watched their approach, its eyes sharp and alert. The two continued their ascent at a punishing pace. Maxim taunted Kurando, boasting that this was the true strength and stamina of giants. He admitted Kurando was fast after the strengthening spell, but insisted he couldn't truly compete. As they entered its territory, the snow leopard snarled, baring its fangs. Maxim faced the beast without fear, acknowledging its domain. Kurando, however, looked upon the massive predator and dryly referred to it as a little kitten. From the mouth of the cave, Akari Fujishiro emerged. She casually asked Maxim why his pet was without a collar and told him not to provoke it. When Maxim called her a barbarian, she retorted that she hadn't praised him. Kurando simply noted that the creature might be hungry. Seeing her standing there, alive and well, Maxim reflected to himself. He had never doubted that a heroine of her stature could have perished so easily in these treacherous mountains. She is overcome with emotion, apologizing for making Maxim worry. The giant gently holds her arm, his expression softening as he expresses his relief that his instincts didn't fail him. He tells her that everything is fine now, and that she can finally let herself cry. He then turns his attention to Kurando, lifting Akari effortlessly with one arm. He assures the young man that none of this was his fault, and that there is no need for apologies. While Maxim and Akari have their reunion, Kurando sits in the snow, facing the massive snow leopard. The beast sits patiently, its long, striped tail resting on the ground behind it. He reaches out, placing a hand on the leopard's head. Looking out at the vast mountain range, he makes a quiet promise to the creature, vowing that one day, they will take their revenge on it. He continues speaking to the leopard, whose name he knows to be Yukishiro. He confides that he, too, once had his hope taken from him. But coming to this world and meeting Yukishiro has given him a new purpose. He wants to return the favor, and he is determined that he will. He begins to scratch under the creature's chin, affectionately telling it not to be so stubborn. The massive feline closes its eyes, seemingly enjoying the attention as its tail twitches behind it. In a sudden burst of energy, the leopard playfully pounces, knocking Kurando onto his back in the soft snow. It bats at him with its paws and wraps its long tail around him, engaging in a bout of rough but affectionate play. The rough housing subsides, and Kurando finds himself nestled comfortably in the leopard's thick, warm fur. Both he and the great beast appear calm and content, a silent understanding passing between them. As they continue their journey through the snow, Kurando reflects internally. He recognizes that Yukishiro is growing stronger every day. This realization fuels his own resolve. He knows he must practice his enhancement magic more, driven by the fear of losing his newfound friend. Their moment is interrupted as they approach Maxim and Akari. The giant watches them come closer and asks if the two of them have finished their reunion. He stands with his companions in the snowy landscape as Maxim announces his plan to return to Loran, asking Kurando to look after Akari in his absence. Kurando, looking stressed and disheveled, dismisses the concern over his appearance as a common thing, though the snow leopard Yukishiro seems to question his messy state. Adjusting his scarf, he asks about Maxim's destination. Maxim confirms he is heading to the Holy Court office, assuring them he won't be long. He explains it is a place where the unjustly accused can prove their innocence. Akari, however, observes Kurando's panicked expression, declaring that his face screams disbelief, a sentiment he silently affirms. Her focus then shifts to the heart of their problem. Akari explains that while no magic exists that can replace a lie detector, there was once a heroine who could create something similar. She reveals that the authorities in Loran believed the Dalgan hunter's deception because she herself had been stigmatized as a criminal, rendering her testimony worthless. The memory of that helplessness is sharp, visualized as a powerful blade striking down. She recalls the despair, thinking to herself that without that heroine's help, she could find no way out of the accusations leveled against her. The ability of that legendary heroine was known by a fearsome name, the Scythe of Truth. An image of the imposing figure forms, her massive weapon held aloft over a sprawling city, a symbol of absolute, inescapable judgment. Before a towering, snow-capped mountain, a small group stands assembled. They are here to see the wielder of the Scythe of Truth, an agent of the Holy Council. Akari Fujishiro explains the nature of the weapon to John. She calls it a gift of the spirits, a blessing from the gods. Whenever its wielder poses a question, any dishonest response will cause the subject to be wounded. If they speak the truth, they remain unharmed. John listens, absorbing the revelation that this powerful figure is a heroine. He remarks that such an ability seems quite troublesome. Akari agrees, clarifying that the heroine only works with entire countries or organizations that formally accept her terms. She elaborates on the strict conditions of the heroine's service. Her results must not be interfered with. Questions must be delivered in person, and the information revealed is only for proof, not to be used outside its intended scope. The risks, from no harm to death, must be acknowledged, and all information is kept confidential. John is impressed by how thoroughly she has thought it all through. Akari adds that she knew the heroine at the academy, where she was a dignified third-year student. Akari confirms that the Holy Council and the Sandra Church, a major religion, have both accepted these terms and begun the judgment of truth, though no deaths have yet been recorded. As the group stands together, Maxim Dahl announces his intent to seek this judgment. But first, he tells John, who is petting the snow leopard, that he'll be staying at his place for the night. His intense gaze darkens. Maxim looks down at him, questioning if he's in a hurry, as it seems his time is limited. The large warrior then states that it's impossible to deal with the giant thorn spider's nest alone and demands John's help. Later, inside the snow leopard's nest high in the mountains, the group makes camp. Maxim, impressed by the lair, summons a magical flame with a gesture of his hand. John immediately questions the waste of magic when there is firewood nearby. But Maxim insists the spell is more than sufficient. He asks if Maxim intends to maintain the spell indefinitely, pointing out its inefficiency. Maxim, surprised, replies that his grimoire said it was possible even without fuel. John counters that it's not as simple as applying a constant, steady flow of mana. John explains that while the first 6 months were difficult, he learned. He then wonders aloud how Maxim has managed to cook it all. He reveals his own method, using magic to fire earthen pots, adding water if the clay was too coarse. Gesturing to a pile of prepared meat and vegetables, he offers to demonstrate his technique. He explains his process to the astonished Akari. After putting meat and wild plants into a pot, he fills it with water conjured by magic, and then heats the entire thing using fire magic. He then pauses, remembering something else. With a flourish, he announces his intention to make skewers using earth magic, conjuring them from thin air. Akari looks on, completely flustered by the casual display of power. The display of power does not go unnoticed by Maxim. He asks Akari if she saw it too, the skillful use of 3 different elemental spells at once. He finds it illogical, wondering why someone with that ability wouldn't just use normal firewood, concluding that John's way of thinking is abnormal. Akari can only stammer that it must be a joke. John responds by presenting a thick, ornate book, explaining that it's just an ordinary grimoire. Maxim expresses his disbelief, but Akari, taking the book, is amazed. She declares it's more like an encyclopedia or a textbook from the academy. John simply confirms her assessment. She continues to leaf through the heavily worn pages, wondering how many times he must have read it. Meanwhile, John offers a piece of cooked meat to the snow leopard. As the beast eats contentedly, Maxim comments on the delicious seasoning, asking if the spices are from John's homeland. John replies that they are from the mountain, a fact Maxim finds ridiculous. As they eat, Maxim chides John for his rudeness, reminding him they are guests. His tone then shifts, becoming stern and authoritative. He issues a direct order. John is to leave this mountain and register as a hunter. John is taken aback. He explains that to avoid suspicion, he didn't bring Akari's luggage, leaving her with no clothes to change into. He pleads with Maxim to reconsider, at least for Akari's sake. Maxim remains firm, explaining that a hunter's license serves as identification and will grant them entry to the city. Akari interjects, insisting that she is fine. Later that night, the decision appears to have been made. Beneath the starry sky over the mountain, Akari seems thrilled with the prospect, while John looks on with a deeply worried expression. He stands with the snow leopard on a snowy cliff edge, gazing out at the vast, imposing mountain range, contemplating the path ahead. The next morning, John greets the waking leopard. Akari approaches him, apologizing for putting him in danger again. As the leopard stirs, it seems mildly annoyed by her presence, but John reassures her it will get used to it. They notice that Maxim is still fast asleep, snoring away. He assures her it's not a problem, as he needed to run some errands anyway. She voices her concern, wondering what would happen if someone recognized him, but he seems puzzled by the question. Taking the opportunity, she formally introduces herself as Akari Fujishiro. He reciprocates, stating his name is Hasebi Kurando, but tells her she can simply call him Janitor-san. She processes this new information, questioning if his name was ever really John. As she recalls the events of the previous night, Maxim Dahl's massive silhouette looms behind them, having overheard their exchange. The imposing commander interjects, his voice laced with irritation, questioning why Kurando felt the need to tell him where he was from when his name was fake. With a disarming smile, Kurando apologizes, claiming he simply forgot and confirming that his real name is, in fact, Kurando. He accepts the explanation for now, stating, if that's how it is, then so be it. Maxim then asks if he's ready to leave the mountain. Kurando's expression hardens as he silently contemplates his departure. His resolve firm, Kurando agrees. With Maxim's command to go, the group prepares to descend. Before they leave, Kurando instructs the large snow leopard, Yukishiro, to stay behind and protect Akari. Their journey begins, with Yukishiro walking alongside Kurando and Akari as they approach a walled town at the base of the mountains. Kurando quietly considers that he will need to bring back a souvenir. Upon reaching the town's gate, Maxim announces his return, only to find it closed. He muses that the guards might be at lunch, and considers simply jumping the wall. Deciding against it, he instead bellows with authority, announcing himself as Maxim Dahl, captain of the kingdom's special hunting White Lance squad, and demands they open up. Once inside, Kurando remarks on Maxim's surprising level of influence. The captain dismisses the observation, stating that this display is nothing significant as they walk through the bustling streets, drawing stares from townsfolk. As they proceed, Maxim provides Kurando with a cover story. He is the sole survivor of a clan that lived hidden in the mountains. Kurando acknowledges the plan as they arrive before a large, imposing building. He can't help but notice how much his own simple attire stands out. He leads him inside to a spacious hall, bustling with armored warriors and adventurers. It is clearly a hunter's guild. Kurando stands in the entryway, taking in the unfamiliar and intimidating environment as Maxim stands before him, a silent and powerful escort. He watched as Maxim Dahl approached the guild's registration counter. The clerk, a man with a weary expression, noted Maxim's sudden reappearance after a long absence. Maxim, however, was not there for himself. He was there to recommend someone as a hunter. The clerk, though he had never seen anyone like Kurando before, accepted Maxim's guarantee. He explained that while they would skip the usual lengthy explanation due to the captain's recommendation, they would still need to verify Kurando's skills and identity later. He slid a registration form across the counter, asking Kurando to fill in his name and place of origin. Kurando simply agreed, placing his hand on the document. But as he looked at the form, he stated plainly to the surprised clerk that he could not write. His illiteracy prompted a discussion nearby. Maxim explained to Akari that he found Kurando while looking for her, revealing that Kurando claimed to be the sole survivor of a clan wiped out by a magic beast attack. The clerk, overhearing, decided on a course of action. He noted that while aptitude tests are usually done in childhood, Kurando's life in the mountains would have prevented it, and proposed they proceed with one now. They moved to a different table for the procedure. When Kurando questioned what an aptitude test was, the clerk explained it was a way to measure one's innate affinity with the spirits. He then instructed Kurando to place his hands forward and channel his mana. Kurando complied, closing his eyes in concentration as he focused his energy. As he did, rings of light materialized around his fingers, each glowing with a different intensity. The clerk observed the results, announcing that Kurando's highest affinity was with darkness, followed by ice. The other elements, earth, water, wind, lightning, fire, and finally light, trailed far behind. Maxim, adjusting his spectacles, remarked on the darkness affinity. He explained to Kurando that while his affinity for darkness was exceptionally high, his affinity for light was almost laughably low. However, he reassured him that in general, such affinities don't have a significant impact on daily life. He continued his explanation, clarifying that for certain professions, affinity is indeed important. Blacksmiths benefit from a high fire affinity to achieve higher temperatures, while those involved in maritime transport find wind or water affinities useful for safer and faster voyages. The question then remained, what about for hunters? The logic extended to magic. Ice spirits are naturally weaker in lands without snow, making ice magic's primary use the preservation of food. Darkness magic, by the same token, is most effective at night. This, however, is also the time when most beasts and monsters are at their strongest. He stood with his back to the room as the guild clerk declared his aptitude test results a complete failure. The clerk, peering over his spectacles, deemed him useless. Around the hall, other hunters began to laugh, mocking that he'd be a one-star competitor for life and was no threat to them. Their derision filled the air as they decided to leave for a drink, abandoning the pitiful newcomer. He turned, hands slightly raised in confusion, as the guild clerk walked away, casually mentioning that his only affinities were for darkness and ice. As the clerk departed, the giant named Maxim spoke up, noting that giants don't have high spirit affinity either, but that there are other ways to make a living, such as swordsmanship. With a thud, he slammed a large, book-like object onto the counter, and a shadowy sigil bloomed across its surface. Nearby, an elderly guild staff member instructed Kurando that the test was over and he should return the rings. His hand rested on the object as the dark, intricate pattern pulsed with energy. He then turned his attention back to Kurando, complimenting him on being good at drawing. Maxim asked if he had manipulated the shadow with darkness magic, then revealed his own need. He had a request form for the association, but needed someone to read it for him. Kurando simply agreed. The request left the young man momentarily confused. He looked down at his hands, then across the empty guild hall, murmuring to himself about the aptitude test. Then, a realization struck him with startling clarity. He spread his hands, a look of intense focus replacing his confusion. He exclaimed that he now understood his own abilities much more clearly, wistfully thinking that if things had been this convenient back in Japan, his life might have been more effective. Just then, a voice called out from behind him. His revelation was interrupted by a group of hunters. One, a man with spiky hair and a fur collar, approached with a smirk. "Hey, how you feeling?" he taunted. "Must have felt like your life was over, huh?" Kurando turned to face the newcomers, his expression calm but wary. Inside a bustling hunter's guild, a large, heavily tattooed man named Maxim confronts Kurando, questioning his manners. Nearby, another hunter scoffs that Kurando's career is finished before it has even begun, unable to even make it as a porter. Kurando remains silent, his expression unreadable. Without warning, Maxim's fist connects with Kurando's face, sending him flying backward across the room. A metal dog tag on a chain is knocked loose from his person. Maxim looks on with a smirk, declaring Kurando to be utterly hopeless. He lands hard on the wooden floor, the tag clinking beside him. From across the room, a powerfully built, white-haired warrior observes the scene, his eyes narrowed with intense scrutiny. The warrior approaches, looming over the fallen Kurando. In a low, firm voice, he commands him to get up. Kurando remains on the floor, his head bowed. As he looks up, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple, the warrior bellows, demanding to know why he didn't defend himself. Kurando explains that it was his first time in a one-on-one fight. He admits he tried to dodge, but his reflexes weren't as sharp as he'd thought. Instead of attacking, he reveals he used life magic to strengthen himself. At the mention of magic, a guild clerk with a severe expression steps forward. He sternly reminds everyone that fights between hunters are strictly forbidden, as is drawing swords or using magic within the branch. The clerk continues, his tone unwavering, stating that no matter the reason, using magic without permission is forbidden. Kurando quietly interjects, pointing out that he was the victim in the situation. Dismissing his claim, the clerk retorts that Kurando provoked them with his arrogant behavior, implying the attack was justified. He instructs them to settle the matter without magic or weapons, as they are both hunters. The blatant injustice makes Kurando realize this world isn't so different from his own, after all. The white-haired warrior then calls out to Kurando, handing him a dog tag. He explains it is a temporary hunter's license, required for identification, possessing weapons, and using third-level magic. As the clerk prepares the paperwork, asking for a signature Kurando cannot provide, Maxim expresses his astonishment that Kurando is able to read. He stands before the guild clerk, who officially accepts his quest to exterminate the grassballs. The clerk warns him that the proof of completion is an undamaged core, urging him to be careful as the veteran warrior looks on. Regarding the form, he requests a copy. The clerk looks up from his desk, surprised, remarking that most hunters don't concern themselves with receipts. He concedes, however, that it would be problematic if Kurando lacked proof of having accepted the quest. With his business concluded, he steps outside. The veteran warrior, seated at a table, tells him that with this, he is no longer a hermit living in the mountains. He has become a member of society. The warrior continues his explanation of the hunter world, detailing how hunters with special skills, or those who operate in difficult environments like the sea or air, are assigned colored stars. This ranking is based on a 10-stage evaluation, with the very peak being a single star. He elaborates that if a quest posted on the board specifies a color, only hunters of that rank or higher are qualified to accept it. If no color is mentioned, then anyone is free to take on the job. Kurando's current rank, he is told, is colorless, less than 10 stars. 1-star hunters are exceptionally rare, with Maxim, the kingdom's exclusive hunter, being one such individual. Rumors also speak of the leader of a party called Wings of Dawn, who supposedly attained the rank within a year. The next morning, as they walk through the town, the veteran warrior lets out a great yawn and asks Kurando if he isn't tired. Carrying a pack over his shoulder, Kurando replies that he is used to waking up early, a habit from his time in the mountains. He observes that Kurando seems to have grabbed equipment he'd stashed outside the village, calling him overly cautious. The warrior then points toward the hills, indicating that the hunting ground is just to the south. Kurando confirms he understands. They arrive at a barren, windswept plain. The ground is littered with the twitching, spherical forms of the grass balls they have come to hunt. After less than an hour, Kurando sits on the ground, looking exhausted and bewildered. He wonders aloud where on earth they are, muttering that if he can't use magic, he feels like he'll need a revolver and a horse to deal with the situation. He stands in a vast, barren landscape, dotted with strange, tumbleweed-like plants. The veteran warrior approaches, congratulating him on finding the first target of his hunting career. The warrior advises him not to make a sour face, explaining that everyone starts by hunting these creatures. He clarifies that they are more like magical herbs than monsters, essentially harmless but annoying weeds. However, he warns Kurando to be careful they don't bite him while he's not looking. The veteran warrior watches with his arms crossed as Kurando kneels and begins to work on one of the plants. He notes that for a brand new hunter, Kurando's methods are quite old-fashioned, observing the improvised sword made from the antlers of a 3-antlered deer. As he works, Kurando admits that he's actually quite proud of his creation. The warrior explains that the 3-antlered deer uses a unique cutting-type magic on its antlers to defend itself from external threats. He successfully extracts a small, glowing core from the plant. He examines the tiny object, realizing that this effort is what it means to be a hunter. Admiring his antler blade, he acknowledges it as a handy piece of equipment and wonders aloud how much a single core is worth. The warrior asks if he is familiar with the currency used in this land. Kurando admits that he is not. The warrior then informs him that at their current price, he would need about 15 of those cores just to afford a loaf of bread. He continues the lesson, explaining that a loaf of bread costs 1 lod, which is a paper note. 1 lod is worth 100 silma, which are coins. As he speaks, the warrior kneels down and hands Kurando a 10-lod note and a small pouch of silma, remarking that he's beginning to wonder if he can even rely on the young man. He clarifies that the money is an advance payment. He tells Kurando to think of it as payment for taking care of Akari, since that can't be done without money. He sets a deadline, stating that he will definitely be back before the next blizzard and that he is counting on Kurando until then. Kurando listens with a somber expression. As he turns to leave, the warrior remarks that Kurando is hard to understand and that he hadn't expected a reward. Kurando replies that he isn't happy about the arrangement, but he made a promise. The warrior looks back slightly, a small smile on his face, and says that Kurando reminds him of how Akari used to be. The warrior laughs it off, saying it doesn't matter as long as the promise is kept. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, he dashes away, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. Kurando watches him go, wondering if the old man just ran away. Left alone in the vast wilderness, he contemplates hunting a few more of the plants. He gets back to work, panting with effort as he harvests more cores. After a time, he gathers a large armful of the grass balls and begins to walk across the desolate landscape under the bright sun. He continues his work, diligently gathering the grass balls and piling them high. As he sits to rest, a massive shadow suddenly falls over him, blotting out the sun and casting the clearing into darkness. A powerful gust of wind from the descending shape slams him into the ground, catching him completely by surprise. Looking up, he sees the source, a colossal bird like a hawk but with magnificent peacock-like tail feathers. He can only stare, stunned by its sheer size. He gets to his feet, noting the creature's entire body is a vibrant blue. He decides to name it the Great Blue Hawk. The attack, so close to town, is a harsh reminder of this world's dangers. He realizes that since magical beasts are sensitive to magic, he must apply his own enhancements slowly and quietly. His training with Yukishiro flashes through his mind, giving him confidence. He pulls out a pair of boomerangs he crafted, certain they will be useful. As the hawk circles back, the reality of his situation sinks in. Today, he is completely alone. As the great blue hawk dives, talons extended, he leaps to meet it, hurling his boomerang with deadly precision. The weapon strikes true, eliciting a pained shriek from the beast. Without hesitation, he unleashes the second boomerang, sending it spinning on a wide arc through the air as he lands back on the ground. The twin projectiles slice through the hawk with devastating force, severing its head and wing. Feathers and blood scatter as the massive body plummets from the sky. With the threat eliminated, he walks away from the carcass, holding one of its ornate tail feathers. He speaks to the empty air as if to an old friend. Yukishiro, I found your souvenir. He returns to town, hauling the enormous bird. The townsfolk stop and stare, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. He feels a wave of unease, realizing that while his clothes already made him stand out, this flashy trophy is drawing even more unwanted attention. In the crowd, a formally dressed man's eyes widen in sudden recognition. He stands there, draped in a massive bird's plumage, as the formally dressed man nervously recounts the rumors spreading through the city. A suspicious individual is dragging a pristine great blue hawk. Under the feathers, Kurando silently questions if he's ever been the subject of such positive attention. His confusion is met with the man's continued explanation that he had a quest specifically for a great hawk. As he speaks, another figure steps forward, his boots crunching on the ground. The newcomer, a man with long, light hair and an arrogant smirk, thanks Kurando for completing the hunt on his behalf. Behind him, a formidable group of hunters gathers. The formally dressed man, realizing the danger, internally fears for Kurando's life before quickly offering a strained, well done. He holds his confident gaze, a smirk playing on his lips, while Kurando, still partially obscured by the bird's carcass, glares back with growing irritation. The group closes in. One of the hunters calls out to get his attention, and the leader points directly at him, making his demand clear. Hand over that great hawk. In the town square, Kurando is immediately surrounded by an aggressive entourage. One of them, a man with spiky hair and facial tattoos, demands to know if Kurando understands who he is speaking to. The group's leader, a long-haired noble named Zal, silences his man. He declares that he wants the hawk as a wedding gift for his sister and warns Kurando not to touch it with his filthy hands. As Zal begins to lead Kurando away, a formally dressed man whispers to a companion, identifying the noble as the son of a council member from the powerful Bragoy family, and a 4-star hunter besides. The name triggers a memory for Kurando, a young girl crying, and he recognizes the man before him, Lord Zal Damatal Bragoy. Zal smirks with condescension, telling the peasant to kneel if he understands, offering to toss him some spare change. He then throws a wad of cash onto the dusty ground, declaring it should be enough. Kurando's expression hardens. With cold defiance, he repeats his stance. It is not for sale. The formally dressed man, now sweating with anxiety, questions Kurando's refusal. He accuses him of trying to drive up the price for a mere 10-star creature, speculating that he just scavenged it from another hunter's kill. He then threatens to have Kurando banned from hunting in the entire country. Kurando's response remains unchanged. His patience exhausted, Zal's face twists in a sneer. He tells Kurando to do as he pleases, stating there is no need for him to remain in the country or as a hunter. With a sharp ring of steel, he draws his sword. Kurando stands his ground, meeting the noble's furious gaze without flinching. Before a blow can be struck, the formally dressed man throws himself between them, his hands clasped in a desperate plea, begging them to wait. He quickly shifts into the role of mediator, turning to Zal with a placating smile to ask which parts of the great hawk he desires. Zal specifies the wings, beak, and eyes. The man then turns to Kurando, asking what parts he wants, questioning why he should be the one to negotiate. Kurando calmly states his needs, the meat and some of its tail feathers. Seeing an opportunity, the man's face lights up. He proposes a deal to Kurando, sell the wings, beak, and eyes to Zal, assuring him he will receive a fair price. He agrees to the terms, stating that it's fine, but insists the disassembly be performed at the Hunters Association. Across from him, Zal Damatal Bragoy reluctantly concedes, saying he'll let it slide for the sake of the association. The onlookers, peering through a nearby window, watch the tense exchange with bated breath. With the tension broken, the official congratulates him, expressing immense relief that he has prevented a feud between the powerful Bragoy family and the White Lance. Outside, the crowd disperses, their anxieties ease. Later, inside the Hunters Association, Kurando approaches a clerk at the counter. He asks about the usual receptionist, and the clerk explains the man is on a break. The clerk then finalizes the transaction, apologizing for the wait and confirming that Zal has paid 1,000 lod for the hawk's meat and tail feathers. The clerk then offers to set up an account for him with the association. He explains that with an account, Kurando will be able to access his fund from any branch in most towns and cities. Surprised by the suggestion, Kurando agrees and asks to deposit the money he has with him. As he ties the money pouch, the clerk announces that a total of 27,000 lod will be deposited into the new account. The sheer amount makes the clerk's eyes widen in disbelief, though Kurando remains perfectly composed. His business concluded, Kurando presents a document, stating his wish to accept a particular quest. The clerk is taken aback, pointing out that Kurando is a 10-star hunter. He explains that quests left unclaimed for a long time become rank-free, but this one was originally a 4-star request, making it far too difficult for a 10-star hunter. The clerk adds that the quest has been on hold for more than a year. Despite the warning, Kurando's expression remains unchanged. Seeing his determination, the flustered clerk has no choice but to relent and process the request. Leaving the association, he walks through the town streets, acutely aware of the painful stares from the townsfolk. Deciding it's better to move out of their way, he ducks into a small, cluttered supply shop. Inside, he browses the wares, noting the availability of salt, pepper, and even chili powder. The elderly shopkeeper, looking up from his newspaper, lists other items in stock: hatchets, whetstones, leather armor, and hemp sacks. Now fully equipped with a large backpack and a newly purchased axe, Kurando stands ready to depart. The shopkeeper tallies up the cost of the supplies, announcing the total comes to 2,500 lod. He departs from the shop under a starry night sky, a massive pack secured to his back. The town sits at the foot of a great mountain, his ultimate destination. With his supplies and a few souvenirs acquired, he leaves the town's stone archway behind, crossing the drawbridge and setting his sights on the mountain path ahead. The journey is long. He treks through the vast, snowy wilderness, whistling a cheerful tune to himself as his footprints mark a lonely trail through the highlands. His whistling abruptly stops. From a rocky outcrop, 3 hooded figures watch him, questioning the tune before one silences the other. Seeing him rest, they draw their bows in unison. A volley of arrows streaks through the air, striking him with brutal, explosive force. In the aftermath, the assailants are bewildered. He has vanished from where he stood, leading one to suspect dark magic. They worry about what to report to their master, Zal. A short distance away, Kurando kneels beside a large snow leopard, unharmed but furious at the attack. Elsewhere in the desolate, rocky landscape, a young woman with short, dark hair looks up, her attention caught by a sudden sound. She sees Kurando approaching with the snow leopard, a massive, lumpy sack slung over his shoulder. She runs to greet him, calling out to the janitor San and noting he must be tired. He returns the greeting, calling her by name, Akari. As she catches up, he sits to rest, admitting it's been a while since he's been around so many people. He asks her to call him Kurando, explaining he's registered as a hunter. He then presents her with a souvenir, a stunningly large, blue feather. Akari is amazed, asking if it came from a great hawk. He confirms her suspicion, shocking her with the news that he killed it. He explains that the beast ambushed him while he was gathering grass balls, and he was fortunate to defeat it, calling the kill an accident. Akari presses him, asking if the creature was truly that difficult to overcome. Kurando considers this. He clarifies that among magical beasts, the great hawk isn't especially rare or powerful. Still, he admits it would be considered an even match for a 7-star hunter, a fact that gives him pause. He watched as Akari examined the brilliant blue feather, her expertise immediately apparent. She explained that to hunt the creature without harming its vibrant color was an incredibly difficult task, as magic would char the corpse and a fall from the sky would dull the plumage instantly. She confirmed it was a very rare item, popular among upper-class ladies and superstitious female hunters. To have any chance of acquiring one, she elaborated, a hunter would need to be incredibly lucky and kill the beast at a very low altitude. Kurando listened, realizing this explained the commotion he'd witnessed earlier. He then turned his attention to his agitated companion, Yukishiro, telling the snow leopard not to be so angry. He had one for the creature as well, and with a swift motion, planted something in the ground before it. He playfully placed more feathers upon the leopard's head, announcing his handiwork with a triumphant tada, and telling Yukishiro it looked beautiful. Akari saw it was just a joke, but the great cat's expression soured, its eyes narrowing in clear annoyance. Despite its irritation, the great cat began to eat. Watching it, Kurando, who was holding one of the small cubs, decided he should eat as well. He asked Akari if she had eaten since he left. She replied that she hadn't, but explained that she'd always had something to eat because Yukishiro would hunt and bring back various things for her. Kurando then inquired if she had learned how to use the items inside the house. She continued eating as she answered, admitting that even if the things Yukishiro brought back were fluffy, she had to eat them to survive. Changing the subject, he led her deeper into their dwelling. He pointed towards a structure carved from stone, announcing that this was the bathroom. Akari looked at the stone basin with surprise. Kurando explained that the water comes from the snow outside or via water magic, and is then warmed up with fire magic, making it quite relaxing. He then pointed to a smaller, specific part of the structure, identifying it as the toilet. It was originally Western style, he explained, but he modified it because it was too difficult for Yukishiro to use. He then told Akari to clean up with water magic since they don't have toilet paper, leaving her wide-eyed with shock. She followed him into a vast, cavernous space, a larder filled with the preserved carcasses of countless magical beasts. Her eyes widened at the sight of so many trophies. Kurando pointed out some of the creatures, great flat-horned rams, white-horned bears, and even some she'd never seen before, like snakehead worms and spiral-horned lizards. He explained that all of them were formidable magical beasts, requiring a team of at least 4-star hunters to take down. Hearing this, Akari wondered aloud if Zal could handle such beasts. Kurando scoffed at the idea, stating that he believed Zal only achieved his rank by hiring skilled hunters to do the work for him. As she listened, a realization struck Akari. Kurando's own skill was far greater than his humble demeanor suggested, likely closer to that of 6-star hunter. She finally understood. The great hawk feather had been pristine, without a single sign of wear from battle. Kurando confirmed her suspicions, explaining that while Zal wore impressive armor, it was for show. He admitted that Zal had coerced him into handing over the great hawk. The name sent a jolt through Akari, her expression shifting to one of shocked recognition as her cheeks flushed. Her shock quickly hardened into a look of grim resolve. Noticing her change in mood, Kurando apologized. "It's pretty cold in here," he said, gesturing forward. "Let's go." He then led the way toward a final, dark opening, announcing that this was the last room. Hasebi Kurando leads Akari Fujishiro into a cavernous, roughly carved space. The stone walls are covered in large, intricate circular glyphs, and the area is cluttered with a workbench and stacked wooden crosses. He explains that this is his workshop and laboratory. As they walk deeper, with the small leopard cub trailing them, he mentions that the cub's mother, Yukishiro, always hated the smell of this room. The space is filled with dirty dishes and various tools, evidence of frequent use. Akari looks around at the strange collection of items, including a large, horned animal skull, and asks why everything looks so shady. He nervously explains that most of it is for self-defense, admitting he would be finished if the local authorities ever discovered his hideout. He then gestures towards the back of the cave, pointing out several targets set up in the distance. He tells her that this is the perfect place to practice archery or magic. Her curiosity piqued. She asks if he is an archer. He clarifies that he can't make arrows, so he uses a boomerang combined with a little magic instead, picking one up to demonstrate. His boomerang strikes a target made from a true horned stag's antler. Akari is impressed, recognizing the rare material, and noting that tribes in the area are known to use such tools. Kurando seems surprised by her knowledge, but she turns the compliment back on him. She adds that while the stags are famous, they're usually only hunted by high-level hunters and are rarely seen in this region, making his possession of the antler all the more remarkable. The conversation shifts, and he asks if she was taught to write. Akari confirms this, explaining her history, half a year in academy learning the world's alphabet, followed by a year of hunting. She then realizes something, remembering that all summoned individuals received an automatic translation ability for speaking and reading, which is why writing had to be learned separately. She muses that, as expected, the original inhabitants of this world wouldn't possess such an ability, though she supposes it might be achievable through magic. Her thought is cut short by a loud roar from the leopard cub. Taking the cue, they decide to eat. Akari offers to help, and soon they're sharing a cooked meal inside the cave. Kurando and the cub eat with immense satisfaction, and he remarks that it has been a long time since he's had a proper meal fit for a person. Akari, looking visibly tired, expresses her surprise that he can cook at all. He explains that he's only using the lowest level of spirit magic, yet consumes a ridiculous amount of power compared to a normal person. He reveals that while 8 hours of sleep used to fully replenish his magic, it now takes twice as long. Akari is stunned by the implication. His magic reserve has somehow increased. As he takes another bite, Kurando simply savors the taste. He listened as Akari explained her own experiences. In the 560 days before they met, she had depleted her magic reserve at least once a day, sometimes up to 3 times on busy days. Each time, she recounted, was an agony unlike anything she had ever felt before. His casual attitude towards the ordeal horrified her. She insisted his situation was completely different, a matter of life and death. When one's magic power is depleted, she explained, their metabolic functions decline, and a single mistake could be fatal. It was a training method meant only to be performed with the support of others. Her sudden intensity startled him. He could only manage a simple wow in response. Akari was flabbergasted by his calm, retorting that it would be far too easy if that were the only danger. She found it impossible that he could survive depleting his magic over 1,000 times by mere coincidence. The truth was a fundamental difference between them. Kurando, born on Earth, possessed a physical constitution that did not rely on magical power. Despite having no experience with magic before his summoning, he had followed the instructions of a grimoire, repeatedly draining his reserves and growing his power to a level an ordinary person could never reach. His power was structured differently, a large reserve of life force and a smaller reserve of magic. He could take the dire risk of tapping into his life force to supplement his magic. Akari asked if he'd taken an aptitude test, and he confirmed. His highest affinity was darkness, followed by ice, earth, and water, with light being his lowest. She was shocked, explaining that one isn't supposed to share such results, as they reveal strengths and weaknesses that could be lethal in this world. To build trust, she shared her own affinities, highest with light, lowest with darkness, with the others falling in between. She noted that all the summoned individuals seemed to have similar results. Kurando thought her affinities seemed much better, but Akari pointed out that his high affinity with both darkness and ice was an exception. As his expression grew serious, she changed the subject to another summoned person, Hayato Ichihara. She revealed that Ichihara possesses two blessings. One is known only as the Divine Sword. His other, Spirit's Idol, allows him to see, hear, and even touch the spirits themselves. But more than anything, this power meant that with the sole exception of darkness, all of Ichihara's elemental affinities were higher than anything ever witnessed before. Kurando, now looking through a grimoire, pieced it together. Ichihara could cast the highest level spells of every element except for darkness. He asked why his darkness affinity was so low, and Akari replied that it was rumored to be a side effect of his other blessing. He runs a hand through his hair, dismissing the thought that the Divine Sword would naturally be incompatible with darkness. When asked if he truly doesn't care, he sighs, clarifying that it's not a matter of caring, but simply how things are. Akari presses him, stating she wants to understand his true feelings. He apologizes, admitting that while he'd like to know what happened to the other summoned individuals, his priority is to live peacefully in this world, something he couldn't do in Japan. He explains his honest desire to avoid trouble, which he believes is inevitable if he gets involved. His thoughts drift to past conflicts, his expression hardening with resolve. He vows to himself that he will absolutely not forgive a certain person, and no matter what, he will not give in. Back in the present, he, Akari, and Yukishiro trek across a snowy mountain pass. The Great Leopard observes that the weather looks unpromising, and Kurando grimly agrees. The trio continues their journey in silence. Akari walks with quiet focus. Kurando glances up at the darkening sky, and Yukishiro seems content, a low hum vibrating in its chest. They pause their trek, small figures dwarfed by the vast, desolate expanse of snow and rock. Kneeling in the snow, Kurando examines a small clump of vegetation. Akari identifies it as tremor grass, and he confirms her guess. She is astonished, realizing that a single clump is worth a staggering 1,000 lod, the same price as a great hawk's feather. Her eyes widen in shock as she realizes she ate something incredibly expensive. Kurando confirms her fear, explaining he used it to flavor their soup and curry the night before, having mistaken it for common grass. Akari deduces that the thorny spiders in the area must have prevented anyone else from harvesting it. Clutching the valuable herb, Kurando feels a wave of relief, believing his lifelong streak of bad luck has finally ended. He offers a piece of the herb to Yukishiro, hopefully asking if this marks a true turn in his fortunes. The Great Leopard accepts the gift, chewing on it contentedly. Watching the two, Akari smiles warmly. She observes that it seems Lady Luck has smiled upon more than just him. Yukishiro affectionately nudges Kurando, purring. Suddenly, the atmosphere changes. Akari notes that it has begun to snow, but then realizes the flakes aren't falling naturally. As Kurando catches one in his palm, Yukishiro lets out a low snarl. He examines the crystalline object and identifies it not as snow, but as an ice spirit that appears to have lost its mind. He recognized the creature instantly. It was a bright red, one of the only truly evil things in this world. Such abominations were the result of spirits losing their sanity from magical power starvation, their sole purpose now to devour the essence of living things. Akari, seeing the monster begin to manifest, asked if she could leave this to him. He agreed, telling her and Yukishiro to buy some time while he helped. They were counting on that. At his command, Yukishiro sprang into action. The snow leopard lunged, claws extended, as the bright red swung its massive, shield-like arm. The beast twisted in midair, dodging the blow and preparing to strike. The leopard's claws raked across the creature's torso, tearing away chunks of its desiccated form. Unfazed, the bright red seized Yukishiro, its grip like iron. In response, the great cat let out a roar, calling forth power. Come, Its movement ceased. Kurando noted that the creature had stopped, and Akari, seeing the opportunity, shouted encouragement. We can do this, Yukishiro. Just a little longer, she called out, turning to Kurando. But the pause was brief. The bright red renewed its assault, slamming Yukishiro to the ground and pinning the beast beneath its immense weight. Kurando could only curse as he watched the tide of battle turn against them. It applied immense pressure, its powerful limbs crushing the snow leopard. As Yukishiro cried out in pain, Kurando's expression hardened, his gaze fixed on the struggle. In a flash, he moved, intercepting the bright red's descending arm with his own forearm. The impact resounded with a sharp crack of force. His intervention saved Yukishiro, but the bright red immediately seized him, its powerful hand closing around his torso and lifting him from the fractured ground. Akari watched in shock as Kurando gritted his teeth, caught in the monster's unbreakable grip. In a desperate struggle, Kurando bites down hard on the arm of the deranged ice spirit. The creature retaliates, impaling him through the chest with a sharp appendage, but he holds fast, his watched face cracking under the strain. The desperate gambit pays off as he unleashes a powerful blast of energy from his hand, shattering the ice spirit in a blinding flash. In the distance, Akari draws her bow, while Yukishiro the snow leopard stands guard over an unconscious body as she runs towards them. The aftermath of the blast is devastating. The creature's head lies shattered on the blood-stained snow. Kurando collapses, face down and unmoving. A large, crystalline block, a remnant of the spirit, cracks and falls apart nearby. His consciousness fades as a distant voice calls his name. The world blurs into an image of the vast, snowy mountains and the dark opening of a cave. When he next opens his eyes, he finds himself lying on a bed of furs inside that very cave. Akari and Yukishiro sit quietly beside him, watching over him. He attempts to sit up, but Akari gently urges him not to move. She delivers the grave news. Both of his arms and his jaw are broken. She continues, apologizing for having to perform a simple, temporary treatment while he was unconscious. Because of his jaw, she explains, he won't be able to speak. But now, she assures him she can begin the real treatment. The treatment, it turns out, involves complete immobilization. Kurando is wrapped tightly in bandages from his neck to his feet. Akari warns him that moving could be dangerous and that he shouldn't even try to clench his teeth. At that moment, Maxim Dahl enters, remarking that Akari is quite skilled with life magic. He reveals with a smile that he was the one who taught her. She then leans over him, explaining with a gentle smile that accelerated healing with life magic requires the patient's consent. She hopes he will accept. Her expression darkens, becoming unsettlingly intense as she prepares to begin. Kurando's eyes widen in sheer terror at the sight. With a cheerful declaration, she begins the procedure, plunging her hands into his chest. Kurando lets out a silent, agonized scream as Yukishiro pins him down. A dark, shadowy energy begins to coalesce and rise from his body, taking on the faint shape of a leopard. His screams echoed through the cave as the agonizing process continued. With a determined, almost cheerful expression, Akari announced she was now starting on his right arm. The dark corruption was visibly purged from his very bones. The ordeal seemed endless. With tears welling in her eyes and a pained grimace, she finally moved to his left arm. The memory of another monstrous battle against a colossal spiked spider flashed through the haze of pain. When the torment finally subsided, he lay exhausted and drenched in sweat. Akari, equally spent, wiped her brow and reassured him that she had reconnected everything. She warned him that he might develop a fever, but was confident he could endure it. He managed to croak out a few words, realizing his voice worked again. He asked her what he had missed. Her confident demeanor faltered, replaced by a look of surprise at his question. Her thoughts turned to the aftermath of the battle. Standing over the shattered remains of the ice spirit, she recalled how Kurando had managed to lock it away, and how she had ensured its complete destruction, obliterating both its head and body. Back in the cave, he looked up at her, expressing his gratitude. A realization dawned on him. She could use light magic, the only kind known to be effective against such creatures. This power was not common knowledge. It was once a secret magic, developed in ancient times exclusively by the priests of the Sandra Church, who were known as the attendants of the moon goddess. However, as the world's population expanded, the frequency of monster attacks and the number of casualties rose dramatically. To combat this growing threat, the church eventually revealed its techniques, leading to the widespread use of light magic seen today. As this history settled in his mind, Akari gently told him he had no need to apologize for making her worry. She then clarified that while she had certainly been concerned, the one who had worried the most was Yukishiro. The great snow leopard was curled protectively on the bed beside him. Hearing its name, the loyal beast gently nuzzled against his cheek. A faint smile touched Kurando's lips as he rested a hand on its head, a quiet moment of reunion witnessed by Akari. He awakens to the gentle rasp of Yukishiro's tongue on his cheek. The great cat licks him, murmuring that she's fine, just worried. He weakly protests. Nearby, Akari examines a club and shield left on the ground, remarking that while she's heard of monsters leaving items behind, this is the first time she has witnessed it. She then offers the shield to Kurando, telling him he should use it to protect himself. Turning her attention to the leopard, Akari gently asks if Yukishiro blames herself for being unable to protect him during the fight. In response, Yukishiro's tail begins to wag with such unrestrained joy that it whips around and smacks Akari squarely in the face, startling her. The starry night sky slowly gives way to the bright light of a new day over the mountain range. But inside the cave, Kurando awakens again, this time drenched in sweat. An intense heat radiates from within him, and he clutches his head, wondering if this is a side effect of the life magic. The feverish heat becomes unbearable. He briefly thinks of Akari and something she might have learned from Maxim. Pushing himself to his feet, he stumbles, waking Yukishiro. He calls out to his sleeping Akari, asking if she can help him. He needs to take a cold bath. She leads him and Yukishiro deeper into the cave, toward a natural pool of water, gesturing for him to come forward. As water trickles into the pool, He feels a wave of exhaustion, wondering if his magic power has run out. He turns to Yukishiro and asks her to get some water. After his clothes are removed and set aside, he quietly thanks the great cat. For a moment, they stand together in silence before the water. He sinks into the pool, letting out a long sigh of relief as the cool water soothes his fever. His peace is shattered when Yukishiro suddenly leaps into the water, landing squarely on top of him and forcing a pained cry from his lips. He rests at the edge of the spring, the fever finally broken. Nearby, the snow leopard, Yukishiro, also lies recovering, its breathing steady. Lifting his head, he stares into the profound darkness of the cave's interior, the water still clinging to his skin. His mind flashes back to the battle, to the twisted form of the creature he struck down. He clenches his hands, the memory sharp and unsettling. This is the first time he has ever killed something that so closely resembled a person. He reflects that he never once thought killing felt good, and doubts he will ever grow to like the sensation of cutting through a living being. He truly hopes such a time never comes again, recalling Maxim Dahl's warning of a potential confrontation. But if it does, he resolves he will not hesitate. He meets Yukishiro's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. His thoughts drift to when Akari found him. She had stood at the cave entrance, holding a small light, her face a mask of shock and concern as she took in the scene. Him, battered and weary, standing over the defeated leopard. The memory continues. A monstrous spider had shrieked nearby. Akari, having tracked him down, was aghast to find him completely naked in the dark. He had yelled at her to be quiet. Her shock then turned to alarm as she noted his rapid healing, asking if he had used his own magic to recover. The flashback fades, leaving the image of Akari sitting alone and dejected in the vast, snowy mountain range, the shriek of a distant creature echoing through the cold air. Returning to the present, Kurando, now dressed, emerges from the cave with Yukishiro. He finds Akari sulking and apologizes for interrupting, before announcing his intention to leave the mountain again. Akari whirls around, stunned. She protests that just yesterday, he was unable to even move, demanding to know what he is talking about. Her expression is fraught with worry. She warns that if this situation escalates into a full-scale attack, it will not end well. Kurando's face is grim as he agrees, stating his doubt that the monster was a one-off incident. He declares his intention to give the Hunters Association a heads-up. He knows the truth of the threat they face. Once a single monster of this kind appears, it can corrupt the nearby spirits, causing them to multiply. To sustain themselves and their growing numbers, they will have no choice but to attack people, feeding on their magic power. He pictured the grim reality of what a multiplying force of corrupted spirits would become, a terrifying, surging horde. This phenomenon was known by a specific dreadful name, a monster attack. His resolve hardened. Turning to Akari, who watched him with concern, he stated plainly that he needed to report it. As he turned to depart, shouldering a simple sack, Akari reached out and firmly grasped the bag, stopping him in his tracks. He glanced back, a silent question in his eyes. Akari looked up at him, her expression earnest and her cheeks slightly flushed. She explained that if he was going, there was something she wanted him to do. In the snowy expanse of the mountains, Akari Fudishiro places a hand on Hasebi Kurando's arm, stopping him. She insists that before he leaves, he must learn to use holy magic, stating she won't let him go if he can't even defend himself. The great snow leopard, Yukishiro, stands patiently beside them. He considers her words, a bead of sweat on his cheek. He knows the activation of holy magic is quite simple, but he inwardly believes no one would willingly choose to use it. The nature of the magic itself is a mystery. The difference between holy spirits and elemental spirits is not well understood. It is an art born of belief and prayer, which gives rise to the brief, powerful presence of a holy spirit. Akari offers to demonstrate. As she prepares, Yukishiro adds that it doesn't truly understand the magic either, but so long as it works, there is no issue. After all, it has been used this way for the last 500 years. 3 days later, Kurando is ready to depart. Akari gives him a book to help pass the time and a small, round shield. He accepts them, then urges her to buy some proper armor, reminding her that she might not have been so badly injured otherwise. With a final wave, she watches him and Yukishiro walk away towards a distant town. Upon arriving at the Hunters Association, he is met with bad news. A weary-looking guild clerk informs him that his quest is invalid and the reward cannot be paid. Stunned, Kurando stands alone in the large hall and asks what that could possibly mean. The clerk explains the bureaucracy behind the decision. The rules for accepting quests were revised by the Dogen Council, stating that so-called suspended requests can only be taken by hunters whose rank is no more than 2 levels below the quest requirement. He clarifies that this revision occurred before Kurando accepted the quest, offering the documents for comparison. He continues, admitting that it was an oversight on the association's part that Kurando was not informed of this rule change. Because they claim responsibility, he assures Kurando there will be no penalties. Kurando, looking downcast, quietly accepts the situation. The clerk then moves on, asking what Kurando intends to do about the Tremor grass he collected. As a special case, he says the association is willing to purchase it. He asks if Kurando will eat the loss, and Kurando grimly agrees that he will. However, Kurando clarifies that his agreement was not about the grass. He states there is something more important he wishes to discuss. When the clerk dismisses him, saying protests against the rules should be taken to the Dalgan Council, Kurando specifies his concern. It's regarding the monsters. He is told to wait as the guild clerk departs to fetch the branch manager. As he stands there, another hunter, a large bald man, mocks him for having his quest invalidated despite successfully collecting the tremor grass. The man is not alone. He is joined by the spiky-haired hunter and the hooded figure from before. The bald man loudly points Kurando out as the coward they'd met previously, much to Kurando's weary annoyance. The group immediately begins to harass him about the tremor grass, demanding to see it. They speculate about how much spice it could be sold for in the capital, calling him stupid for intending to eat something only nobles can afford. Kurando flatly tells them he's going to eat it and that it's none of their concern. His refusal is met with force. The large bald hunter grabs him from behind, locking him in a powerful hold. With a sneer, he again demands to see the grass, calling Kurando a sneaky bastard. He struggles, demanding to be released, but the man's grip is like iron. The hunter just grins, enjoying his power over him while the hooded figure looks on, questioning what is happening. Suddenly, the bald man lets go, staring at his own hand in disbelief. He hadn't felt bone or muscle, but something else entirely. The spiky-haired hunter remarks that Kurando didn't even use magic as a woman appears in a nearby doorway. The woman's silhouette stands in the doorway, a silent observer of the commotion. Kurando glances at his own hand, a thought forming in his mind. He had a feeling, but this confirms it. Leaving the hunters behind, he follows the clerk. He realizes his daily struggles with Yukishiro must be having an effect, strengthening his body beyond normal limits. He is led to a door and enters, announcing his presence to the man sitting at the desk inside. The man, the branch manager, addresses him with cold authority. He states that Kurando has already caused problems and now claims a monster has appeared. He dismisses the idea that a recommendation from the White Lance will afford him special treatment and warns him not to underestimate the guild. He then introduces himself as the branch manager, Yakov Sergei Mazel. He listens to the manager's tirade, unfazed. He understands the situation. He simply states his name is Kurando, to which the manager replies that he already knows. He stood before the branch manager, explaining the recent string of complaints. He acknowledged that his actions regarding the Great Hawk had drawn attention, and that he had deliberately hunted above his 10-star rank. This, he admitted, had caused trouble for Zal, who then used his family's influence to have the quest rules altered and invalidated. The association, Kurando noted, had no choice but to comply. Despite his explanation, the branch manager remained unimpressed, merely stating that he would listen to the report. Kurando internally conceded that he hadn't expected much of a reaction, while the nearby clerk seemed to be anticipating someone of greater importance. His attention then shifted to a woman who had just entered the room. With a dismissive sneer, Yakov questioned the very idea of a 10-star hunter defeating a corrupted ice spirit alone, then gestured towards the small shield Kurando carried, asking if that was meant to be the proof. He declared the shield to be completely ordinary and accused Kurando of lying, advising him to at least make his fabrications believable. The clerk chimed in, agreeing that he could see through the refugees' schemes and questioning why anyone would approve a rank increase based on such a claim. As the branch manager deemed Kurando a worthless person with no option but to slowly climb the ranks, the woman listened, touching her lips in contemplation. The woman then spoke, cutting through the tense atmosphere. She explained that with the number of hunters having significantly decreased, a decision had been made to assign Kurando a supervisor to avoid dismissing him outright. The announcement caught the branch manager by surprise. He elaborated on her point, his expression hardening as he explained that many good hunters had been lost on a particular mountain, all due to the vanity and desire for honor of so-called heroes. Kurando listened, completely bewildered by the turn of conversation. As a knock sounded at the door, the branch manager issued a final decree. Kurando was now forbidden from accepting any quest without his supervisor. Though Kurando was internally dismissive of the restriction, he turned to see the tall woman, now standing directly beside him. She introduced herself as Ureta Hagen, a 4-star hunter, and stated that she would be in his care from that day forward. The branch manager's demeanor changed instantly, welcoming her with open arms and evident relief. He could only stare in confusion as his new supervisor gave him a knowing wink. She then turned back to the branch manager and declared her intention to take the new guy with her. The request left Yakov utterly aghast, his face a mask of shock and horror. He argued vehemently against the arrangement, insisting to Kurando that a hunter of his level was a national asset who shouldn't be burdened. The branch manager urged the young man to focus on becoming a 3-star hunter instead, but his protests were ignored. Ureta Hagen had already made up her mind, beckoning for the new guy to follow her. Kurando, caught in the middle, could only wonder if he should obey. As he turned, he glanced back at the branch manager, whose face was a mask of pure fury. Despite the man's anger, a thought crossed Kurando's mind. This unexpected turn of events might actually be interesting. His decision made, Ureta led him away from the office and into a raucous tavern. The establishment was packed with hunters of all kinds, their voices filling the air with boisterous conversation and laughter. She wasted no time, grabbing a large wooden mug and downing its contents in a single, long gulp, much to the admiration of the surrounding patrons. Wiping her mouth, She then procured another mug and presented it to a hesitant Kurando. He stared at the frothing beverage with apprehension. Across from him, Ureta simply watched, a faint, amused smile playing on her lips. Urged on by the encouraging shouts of the other hunters, he felt the pressure mount. With a grimace, he tilted his head back and drained the entire mug. The tavern erupted in a roar of approval. He slammed the empty mug down, his head already spinning from the potent drink. He managed to confess to Ureta that he wasn't very good with alcohol, finding the taste too bitter. She replied that the taste often depends on one's mood. Then, leaning closer with a sly smile, she added that if he preferred something sweeter, she was more than willing to oblige. Her offer brought to mind the well-known tradition. Senior hunters always treat the rookies to a drink. He recalled being offered a pint of something strong, cautiously agreeing on the condition that it was only a small glass. The informal atmosphere prompted proper introductions. She told him her full name, Ureta Hagen, identifying herself as a 4-star hunter and, as was plain to see, a giant. She insisted he drop the formalities and just call her Ureta. In return, he introduced himself as Kurando, a provisional 10-star hunter, and pointedly, a human. He finished by saying she could call him whatever she pleased. She takes a long drink from her mug and asks the newbie hunter if he has any questions. Kurando admits that he has so many it's giving him a headache, but he has one primary concern. Why did she want to be his guide? He observes that she seems quite troublesome and doesn't appear to need a guide herself. She clarifies that a guide's role is simply to help new hunters accept quests and offer advice, not to interfere. This explanation only deepens his confusion, and he asks what exactly a guide is. She offers a simple answer, because she's qualified. With a sly smile, she adds a crucial detail. All responsibility for his actions now falls on her, so he had better play nice. As she speaks, a dark silhouette appears in the tavern's doorway. The figure steps into the light, revealing a short, stout man with an enormous mustache. He greets the tavern loudly, arms spread wide, asking why it's so quiet. The other patrons stare in surprise. Before he can finish announcing that he's come to collect his trans, an unseen force sends him flying backward out the door. He is launched with such power that he spins through the air, the door frame splintering from the impact. The man lands in a heap on the grass outside, motionless. Inside, the patrons are bewildered. One asks if the ejected figure was an orc, but another corrects him, saying it looked more like a pig. Kurando looks on, stunned, while Ureta calmly holds her mug, completely unfazed. The doors to a bustling hall burst open, and a stout, formally dressed man collapses face first onto the wooden floor, kicking up a small cloud of dust. The patrons inside stare at the spectacle. The man slowly pushes himself up into a seated, hunched position, patting the dust from the back of his clothes. Rising to his feet with a wide, unsettling grin, the man announces his presence. He declares that he heard someone had accepted the quest to gather Tremor grass, and came straight away. A guild member recognizes him as Baron Potapenko and thanks him for coming. The patrons begin to whisper amongst themselves. They identify him as the pig-like Baron, a gluttonous noble who supposedly wasted his entire fortune on food. They wonder why he would want Tremor grass, questioning if spices are truly the better option in this day and age. A guild clerk approaches the Baron, bowing and apologizing profusely. He explains that the matter with the Tremor grass was a mistake made by a newcomer. The Baron, however, ignores the apology, sniffing the air with an intense focus. He leans down and demands that the clerk explain the strong scent he has detected. As the Baron gets down on all fours, sniffing the floorboards like an animal, the onlookers are bewildered. One of them wonders aloud if he might actually be a pig. The hunters in the crowd, including the spiky-haired man and the woman with the pearl necklace, look down at the Baron's bizarre display with a mixture of contempt and curiosity. The Baron's search ends as he looks up, his gaze locking onto Hasabi Kurando. He identifies Kurando as the source of the scent and asks him directly if he has the Tremor grass, offering to take it regardless of any issues with the association. Kurando, kneeling to meet the Baron's gaze, confirms that he is indeed the client who requested the Tremor grass. The Baron's face lights up with manic glee, exclaiming that he has waited a whole year for this day. The Baron eagerly demands the Tremor grass. As he does, the guild clerk turns away, his face etched with deep concern and sweat beading on his brow. Baron Potapenko trembles with anticipation, clutching the clumps of Tremor grass. He roars in excitement, trying to calm his racing heart. Without hesitation, he shoves a piece into his mouth, the sound of his chewing filling the tense silence of the guild hall as Hasabi Kurando and Ureta Hagen watch with starkly different expressions. As he chews, tears of pure ecstasy stream down his cheeks. His eyes are squeezed shut, lost in the overwhelming flavor and sensation of the herb he has craved for so long. His dramatic reaction leaves Kurando completely baffled, unable to comprehend the source of such profound emotion. Ureta, however, continues to watch him intently, her sharp eyes missing no detail. The Baron finally speaks, his voice thick with emotion. He declares that this is the very taste he remembers, a nostalgic flavor from his youth when his grandfather gave him a single piece. He confirms with absolute certainty that it is Tremor grass, much to the confusion of the other hunters gathered around. Overcome with gratitude, he suddenly lunges forward and grabs Kurando's face with both hands, thanking him repeatedly. Kurando, taken aback by the sudden physical contact, stammers a response. His grip remains firm as his tone shifts from joyous gratitude to business. He asks Kurando directly about the reward for the quest. Kurando flinches, stammering an excuse. He explains that he isn't doing well financially at the moment, having just spent his money on groceries. The Baron's cheerful demeanor instantly vanishes, his face contorting with shock and disappointment. The Baron's distress is palpable. He sweats, wondering aloud what to do. Ureta, unable to contain herself, covers her mouth to hide a laugh. She points out the absurdity of the situation, asking how Kurando could possibly afford anything the Baron might wish for. At that moment, the guild clerk steps in, clearing his throat to formally introduce the client as the head of the Potapenko family. The title sinks in for Kurando. Thinking quickly, Kurando leans over to the guild clerk and whispers a question, gesturing towards the Baron. He asks if a certain course of action might upset their noble client, whose face is now slick with nervous sweat. The Baron's anxiety melts away, replaced by a wide, knowing grin. He clenches his fists in excitement, declaring that he understands the situation perfectly. Kurando watches his sudden change in mood, the nature of his whispered suggestion still a mystery. Baron Potapenko sweats, mulling over the proposition. He admits to himself that even for a poor baron, the item is a family heirloom. For a hunter, it holds little practical use, making him question the balance of the exchange. Still, his curiosity is piqued. The memory of the offer is vivid. Kurando holding out the Tramer grass, its scent wafting towards the Baron, whose desire is palpable. His enthusiasm having won him over, the Baron declares that he accepts the deal. He has only one condition. If Kurando finds anything else delicious in the future, he must bring it to him. Kurando agrees, stating that for a hunter, it shouldn't be too difficult a task. With a wide grin, the Baron seals their agreement. The guild clerk looks on, perplexed by the unusual arrangement. To formalize it, the Baron calls out loudly, demanding someone bring him paper, a pen, and a desk. As they sign the contract, he reminds Kurando that the item is a family heirloom and asks that he keep the transaction quiet. Kurando agrees. The Baron then mentions his home is a short distance away, towards Tansk, before giving a cheerful thumbs up and taking his leave. Watching him depart, the guild clerk remarks to the other hunters that despite having fallen from grace, the Baron still carries the presence of a noble. He adds with a smirk, however, that from behind, he looks exactly like an orc. Moments later, Ureta Hagen approaches Kurando, who is still kneeling. She finds it surprising that he agreed to the terms, reminding him that the Baron is still the head of an old noble family. Leaning in close, she playfully presses her cheek against his and asks if he tricked the man. She then playfully pushes her chest into his face before pulling back with an apology, claiming she forgot she was drunk. Ureta admits she was trying to tease him to see if he would blush, but he wasn't much fun. Her demeanor then shifts to seriousness as she demands to know what he truly extorted from the Baron. He begins to explain, revealing that the heirloom is the original source of autonomous magic, a power that ruled the world before the discovery of spirit magic. He clarifies that while spirit magic operates according to the world's laws, autonomous magic can temporarily ignore them. However, its use is arduous, requiring complex incantations and aids like staves and rings. The high cost and difficulty meant only a select few, primarily the nobility, could wield it, isolating them from the lower classes. He concludes that noble families have kept this magic secret, passing it down and even developing it into magical tools. Ureta laughs, questioning the deal's worth since there's no guarantee the magic is genuine. Kurando calmly retorts that there is also no guarantee he would ever find any food to bring the Baron. She considers the deal with the Baron, doubting he's clever enough for complex schemes. Still, she can't shake the feeling he might be laughing at them. She ultimately decides the risk is worth it, given how rare and difficult to obtain such original texts are. Kurando agrees, adding that this wouldn't be the first time for such a gamble. He then adds that this is his first visit to this place, and expresses his hope that the exchange was a pleasant one. Her gaze sharpens as she studies him, remarking that he doesn't carry himself like an inexperienced rookie hunter. She then asks if he plans on taking a quest today. He looks away, holding a mug, and vaguely replies, maybe tomorrow. Ureta finds his hesitation pathetic, commenting on the difficulties of being human. Flustered, Kurando recalls her earlier instruction for him to drink. She takes a drink herself before pressing him further, asking what the matter is. She points out that while he intends to be a hunter, his current attire suggests he lacks funds. Kurando clarifies that he received a large sum of money from a certain hot-headed individual. This prompts her to ask if he brought his own materials, to which he confirms his plan to have something crafted in town. He confirms that he did, reaching into his bag and pulling out a large rolled-up hide. As he unfurls it, her eyes widen in shock at the sight of the material. She immediately demands to know its origin, but he refuses to tell her. She leans in close, warning him that if the hide of a great horned lizard is brought in by a 10-star hunter without its origin being clearly stated, it could be treated as stolen goods. The thought hadn't occurred to him. Seeing his predicament, she offers a solution. She could have it made into armor for him in one of the major cities, if he's amenable. He contemplates her proposal, his mind flashing to an image of the great snow leopard, Yukishiro. He acknowledges his debt to the creature for acting as his guide, but internally questions if he can truly entrust the items it left behind to Ureta. After a moment of deliberation, he makes his decision. He informs Ureta that he plans to complete a quest the next day and asks if she will accompany him, suggesting they can handle the armor arrangements afterward. She smiles, agreeing to his terms, and adds that they should acquire some basic armor for him in the meantime. As they get up to leave, Kurando announces their departure, but promptly stumbles, falling face first into her chest. She looks down at him, completely unimpressed, and asks flatly if he is doing this on purpose. The next morning, she found Kurando ready, having managed to don his new light armor by himself. With a simple, "All right, let's go," he confirmed he was prepared, and the two set off for the Hunters Association. Upon arriving, they were met with a massive throng of hunters, so dense that Kurando complained he couldn't see a thing. Ureta confirmed she couldn't either. Amid the crush, another hunter's voice cut through, complaining in disbelief that the only quest available for a 10-star hunter was a menial task of gathering grassball cores. She found the situation peculiar, musing that it was the first time she'd ever seen a Hunters Association with no quest for newcomers. Even without direct requests from the townsfolk, the association was supposed to create tasks for training purposes. Her thoughts were interrupted by a man's voice calling out, "Excuse me, would you happen to be Ureta Hagen, also known as the Hornet Conqueress?" The man who had spoken was Sol Damatal Bragoy, a confident smirk playing on his lips. Ureta turned to face him, her expression hardening with clear annoyance. Internally, she seethed that nickname. "I really hate." In a crowded hall, a man with long, light-colored hair addresses a tall, powerfully built woman. He introduces himself as Zal Damatal Bragoy, a 4-star hunter and the leader of the town's top-ranked party, Direwolf. He asks what she wants, noting he heard she was undertaking the Trial of Nations to become a 3-star hunter. He suggests the fastest way to do so is to tackle a major request and invites her to join his party in hunting the giant thorn spider. The woman points out that it's a 3-star quest. Zal smirks, explaining they can simply claim it as a reserve quest, which won't violate any association rules, adding that the local branch is quite flexible. Nearby, Kurando observes, realizing this was Zal's scheme. In the guild hall entrance, another voice declines, stating he's too busy acting as a guide. Zal scoffs loudly, calling it a waste of time to guide a stupid refugee, and questioning if fulfilling such a responsibility is natural for a senior hunter. He continues his public tirade, boasting of his family's significant role in the country compared to a random refugee. He tells the assembled hunters that no one should be raising their own competitors and that the association prioritizes its citizens, suggesting foreigners should be chased away. He then assures the woman she is special. Zal reminds her that she is a 3-star hunter, far superior to the rest of the Dalgan. He recalls her famed title, Ureta Hagen, the Hornet Conqueress, who once felled mighty beasts with a single spear thrust. He then condescendingly adds that neglecting her duties as a guide to tag along on hunts will be a disgrace to her ancestors. Despite his words, Ureta calmly refuses his offer. Annoyed, Zal tells her to do as she pleases, then sneers that an insect and a refugee are a perfect match. As he turns to leave with his party, he bellows for the crowd to get out of his way. As the group departs, Sol notes that Zal backed down surprisingly easily. Kurando observes that simply mentioning her ancestors was enough to end the conversation, to which Sol confirms that it is well known the Dalgan revere their ancestors above all else. Watching from a balcony, Sol remarks that he doubts this is the last they will hear of him. Kurando agrees, adding that Sol is surprisingly sharp, considering how little he knows. His prediction proves true moments later, as Zal and his party barge into an office. The branch manager, Yakov Sergei Mazel, looks up from his desk, startled, and asks to what he owes the pleasure of their visit. He crashes to the floor, sent sprawling by the force of the kick. As Sol stands over him, Zal pushes himself up, seething that he doesn't have time for a damn country bumpkin. He lies there, stewing in his own fury. He can't believe Sol not only refused to give him the hawk, but has now somehow aligned himself with a 4-star hunter. He wonders how Sol worked his way into her good graces, enraged that the man insists on provoking him. His rage carries him to the branch manager's office. The manager, Yakov Sergei Mazel, notes Zal's foul mood and, with a knowing look, suggests giving his adversary a particular kind of request. Meanwhile, at the guild's front counter, a clerk explains the situation to Ureta Hagen and Kurando. He notes that it's understandable she wouldn't know, having just arrived, but this town is on the outskirts. Aside from simple grassball hunting, there are no requests available for 10-star hunters. The clerk continues, stating that her refusal to form a party is a concern for the association. He calls her a hindrance who lacks discipline and suggests she give up. As Ureta calmly takes this in, Kurando silently fumes, thinking he'll kill the man. Her response is immediate and decisive. Ureta declares that she and Kurando will form a party. The clerk is stunned, questioning why a 4-star hunter would team up with a 10-star. She leans over the counter, her presence intimidating. "What? Do you object to it?" she asks, her voice low. The clerk can only stammer in response. Before the clerk can answer, a new voice cuts in. Branch manager Yakov appears, forbidding the formation of such a party. Ureta turns to him, retorting that such a prohibition is not within the association's authority. He calmly explains that risking the life of a hunter who could become a 3-star for the sake of a newbie would be a blunder on a national scale. He tells Kurando there is no need to form a party, as he has prepared a quest just for him. If this quest is failed, he warns, Kurando's temporary registration will be revoked. He adds with a thin smile that Kurando should consider it a mandatory quest. Such quests are issued when a community with a guild branch faces a crisis, like a monster attack, allowing the association to forcibly conscript hunters. The scene opens on a fortified town nestled against a mountain range. A stone path leads up to the settlement, with a massive, scaly tail of a defeated beast being dragged away, leaving a trail in the dust. As Sol departs with his prize, Ureta stands with her arms crossed, watching him go. She then turns her attention to Kurando, asking what he plans to do now. He begins to answer, stating that from now on, he thinks he will continue on his way. Ureta is taken aback by his composure, questioning how he can remain so calm after being forced into such an unreasonable quest. Kurando replies nonchalantly that if it proves impossible, he will simply run away, adding that since he lives in the mountains, none of it truly matters. Her expression softens with confusion. He turns his back to them, gazing out over the rooftops of the town below. He reflects internally that this is not a feeling he has experienced many times, even from before he had the mountains to call home. Standing there in silence, his strange detachment prompts Ureta to remark on how odd he is. Sol, still within earshot, concurs. She then speaks more seriously, conceding that while the branch manager's actions were technically within the rules, she has never witnessed a branch act so deplorably. Kurando listens, his expression hardening. The memory of the confrontation 2 hours earlier surfaces. Ureta had furiously demanded how the situation could possibly meet the criteria for a mandatory quest. The branch manager calmly explained that magical beasts known as Miss Starlings were gathering around the city, and since they attack anything that approaches the water, they were deemed out of control. He had presented the official quest document, a 9-star quest to destroy the nest of the Miss Starlings without damaging the tree, with a 1-week deadline. Ureta slammed her hand on the counter, declaring it unacceptable and accusing him of deliberately using the quest to harass Kurando. The manager simply replied that they always operate within the rules. Kurando, looking over the document, noted that he had never even seen a Miss Starling before. The branch manager continued his justification, stating that the residents were subjected to noise and feces from the nearby nest. He rhetorically asked what kind of damage a simple flock of birds could cause. The guild clerk interjected, pointing to an open book and telling them to look at a picture of the creature. The illustration showed a small, fluffy, chick-like bird. Looking at the image, Kurando thought to himself that it looked rather cute. Ureta seemed to agree, but the branch manager's face twisted into a sinister smirk as he declared that a half-hearted extermination would not suffice. The entire flock, he insisted, must be culled. He is warned of the creature's immense reproductive ability. Even if only a single missed starling survives, the flock will return in no time. The branch manager elaborates that it will simply return to the tree and form an even larger flock. Ureta turns to Kurando, her expression worried. She explains that she cannot help him while acting as his guide, and that such a task requires more than one person. She asks if he knows anyone who might join him. He ignores her concern and asks the branch manager if the association can provide equipment, like a net. The manager bursts into a mocking laugh, questioning if Kurando truly thinks it's possible. He agrees to provide as many nets as he wants, but his tone is menacing. Ureta watches, alarmed, whispering Kurando's name. The manager's face twists into a cruel smirk as he delivers his ultimatum. If Kurando fails, there will no longer be a place for him in this town. With a grim look of acceptance, Kurando agrees to the quest. He is handed a copy of the quest form. As he takes the document, he silently wonders how one can even tell the difference between a mandatory quest form and an ordinary one. While he examines the paper, Ureta confronts the branch manager, asking why he cares so much. The manager retorts, asking why she wouldn't. Kurando looks up, remarking that it seems quite important, but Ureta dismisses it, saying it's fine. Later, walking through a barren landscape with Tama, Ureta calls out to him. She asks a personal question. Does he have any family? He glances at the cub, thinking to himself that he has one, and maybe another as well. She presses him, asking if he even wants to be a hunter, pointing out that it's only causing him problems. He responds grimly that if he fails, he'd like her to gather other hunters and kill them instead. He speculates that this is what the branch manager wants anyway, to give the rookie some experience. He looks out at the empty horizon, confessing that he is only here for a half-hearted reason. If it comes to it, he would gladly give up being a hunter. He stood before Ureta in the desolate landscape, admitting he felt bad for her, having volunteered as his guide, and for Maxim, who had recommended him for this task. His gaze was fixed on the ground, a hint of unease on his face. Her expression sharpened at the mention of the name. She confirmed if he meant Maxim Dahl, the White Lance, her voice laced with disbelief. She questioned why Maxim would recommend him, suggesting that in that case, Maxim should be the one watching over him. A flicker of memory crossed her face as she conceded that she'd made some regrettable decisions in her youth. Kurando, sensing the connection, asked if she knew him. Instead of answering, she abruptly closed the space between them. Her hand shot out, gripping his chin and forcing his gaze to meet hers. Leaning in close, her expression intense, she demanded to know if there was something he wanted to say. He flinched, a flush rising on his cheeks at the sudden, aggressive intimacy. Far from their confrontation, under a roiling, dark sky, stood the source of the impossible quest. A colossal, twisted tree dominated the landscape, its branches a writhing mass of shadow. From it, a legion of mist starlings erupted, countless dark forms with piercing, white eyes, a tide of malevolence pouring into the world. Inside a crowded hall, a group of hunters gathers. A tall, powerfully built woman addresses them, introducing herself as Ureda Hagen, leader of the werewolf hunter group. From the crowd, a man with long, light-colored hair steps forward, announcing his own name, Sol Domitor Bragoy, a 4-star hunter. He turns his attention to Ureda with a confident smirk, asking what she wants. He mentions hearing that she has almost reached 3 stars, noting that the fastest way to advance is to complete a difficult order. He then extends an invitation to hunt a giant spiked spider. She questions if it's a 3-star quest. Sol confirms it is, but explains that since the order has been posted for a long time, he can bend the rules for her. Nearby, Kurando observes the exchange, realizing the extent of Sol's influence in this place. Sol internally dismisses the idea. He muses that while it's natural for a hunter to want to satisfy their primal urges, he sees no reason to bother with this stranger, considering it a waste of his time. He voices this disinterest to Ureda, stating he has no need for her. He reminds her that she had a curator when she was a novice, suggesting the guild should handle newcomers. He declares that they have their own lives and no time to foster potential competitors. Ureda retorts that she is an outsider, just as all foreigners are. Sol agrees, adding that this is precisely why outsiders are eventually driven away. She elaborates, explaining that in other towns, the gap between 2-star and 3-star hunters is immense, leaving dangerous monsters unchecked. This, she says, is why the guild restricts the influx of new hunters. Recalling her own past, she mentions fighting a man-eating bird with a spear on her first hunt, earning her the name Glimmering Fong, Ureda Hagen. She concludes that if established hunters don't take on jobs, they tarnish the town's reputation and deny newcomers' chance. Turning away from Sol, she apologizes but says he'll have to find someone else. Annoyed, Sol dismisses her with an insult, calling her a fat, stinking migrant. As he shoves past, Ureda ignores him and grabs Kurando's arm, asking why Sol called her fat. Before he can react, she pulls him along, telling him to come with her. As the crowd begins to disperse, another hunter asks Kurando if she refused Sol's offer. Kurando, looking after the departing woman, notes that she mentioned her ancestors, a subject the giants hold in high regard. He concludes that their discussion is finished. The hunter watches from a balcony as Sol's group walks away. He remarks that Sol won't let the matter rest. Though it's the first time he's seen him, he is certain of it. His prediction proves true moments later. Sol and his party stride purposefully into an office, startling the branch manager, Yakov Sergei Mazel, who sits behind his desk. One of Sol's men formally announces his arrival. He stands over the fallen hunter. Sol, having been thrown across the room, sprawls on the floor and mutters his dislike for the man he calls a mountain goat. He lies there, fuming. Sol recalls that the leader of the White Spear had recommended him, a 4-star hunter, only for him to now be treated like a lackey to this damned bastard. The humiliation is infuriating. The branch manager looks down at him, his expression unreadable. He asks why Sol is in such a foul mood, then calmly suggests that perhaps they should give him that very quest. Meanwhile, at the guild's main counter, the clerk addresses Ureda Hagen, noting her recent arrival. He informs her that there are no other 10-star quests available, aside from hunting grassballs. He elaborates on the guild's policy, stating that if a hunter cannot find a group, it's best for them to stay out of it, as hunters who can't work in a team are not needed. Kurando quietly suggests that he might as well just die, a sentiment Ureda seems to understand. In response, Ureda makes a decisive move. She declares that she will form a group with Kurando and instructs the clerk to register them. The clerk is stunned, questioning the pairing of a 10-star hunter with a 3-star. She presses the issue, leaning over the counter and asking the clerk directly if he has any objections. Kurando remains silent beside her. Her attention shifts as the branch manager approaches. She turns to face him, stating that the guild has no authority to prohibit the formation of their group. He calmly lays out the guild's position, acknowledging that a high-ranking hunter partnering with a novice is an unusual circumstance. He explains that they have prepared a specific quest for Kurando. If the quest is completed, he continues, they will then consider allowing him to partner with an improper participant. He presents a formal document, much to Kurando's surprise. The branch manager clarifies the nature of the document, calling it a forced quest. He explains that such quests are issued during emergencies, like a sudden increase in a magical beast population. In these situations, the guild has the right to forcibly recruit hunters. On the outskirts of a fortified town, nestled against a rugged mountain range, a new threat emerges. Along the cobblestone streets and sturdy stone walls, life proceeds unaware. But just beyond, in the tall grass, something immense slithers forward, its heavy, scaled tail dragging across the earth. Standing on a barren, rocky outcrop, Ureda Hagen turns to Hasabi Kurando, her arms crossed. She asks him what he plans to do now, prompting him to consider his next move. He replies calmly that if he can't accomplish anything, he'll simply run away and return home. His composure surprises Areta, who questions his calmness, calling his demand unreasonable. She points out that since he lives in the mountains anyway, this matter shouldn't concern him. His gaze drifts over a nearby town as he reflects internally. He has experienced situations like this before, back when he had no mountains to which he could escape. The memory of a massive, white-haired warrior, a mountain of muscle who ran away and never returned, surfaces in his mind. That experience, he recalls, taught him patience. Returning to the present, he stands silently. Behind him, Sol Damatal Bragoy watches alongside Areta, remarking that Kurando is a strange one. Areta advises him not to lose his head, admitting this is the first time she's encountered such a terrible guild branch. Kurando, however, looks at her intently and points out that everything is still being done according to the rules. Inside the guild hall, Areta stands before the branch manager, Yakov Sergei Mazel. She fumes internally, acknowledging that while the situation is infuriating, there is nothing she can do about it. A memory from 2 hours prior reveals the source of her anger. Yakov had informed her that fog starlings were flocking on the outskirts of the city. Enraged, Areta had demanded to know what kind of magical beast had gone out of control, to which Yakov calmly replied that their attacks on people near the water confirmed they were, in fact, out of control. The official quest posting confirms the details. A 3-star order to eliminate a flock of fog starlings near a large tree, open to any hunter. The reward is 1 clove per kill, with a strict note to avoid damaging the tree. Areta furiously declares the quest unacceptable, accusing them of abusing their position. Yakov, unmoved, simply states that they are acting according to the rules. Back in the present, Yakov turns his attention to Kurando. Noting his apparent lack of knowledge about the creatures, he asks him to tell them what he knows about these birds. He listened as the branch manager explained the nature of the damage caused by the birds. They lived in a massive flock at the top of a large tree, and the local people suffered from their constant noise and droppings. The manager then pointed to an illustration in a book, revealing the creature to be a small, fluffy, chick-like bird. He looked down at the book, thinking to himself that it was such a trifle. Areta watched with a concerned expression as the branch manager leaned in, stating with a sharp grin that the entire flock had to be eliminated, otherwise there was no point. The problem with the creatures was their astonishing rate of reproduction. They multiplied so quickly that if even a few were left alive, the flock would soon be restored to its former size. If left unchecked, they would simply gather once more into an enormous flock and resettle on the very same tree, continuing the cycle of nuisance. Sensing the immense difficulty of the task, Areta turned to Kurando. She noted that the quest required a large number of hunters and would be hard to handle alone, offering her help to him, even if it was just her. Her offer was cut short by the branch manager's booming laughter. He mocked Kurando, questioning if he truly believed he could handle it. Kurando calmly asked if the guild could provide a fine net, to which the manager sneered that he could have as many as he wanted. His response was quiet but firm. He agreed, accepting the quest. The branch manager's smirk widened as he delivered a final threat. If Kurando failed, there would be no place left for him in their city. He took the offer document, a copy of the quest form. As he held it, he reflected internally that he saw no difference between this compulsory order and any other ordinary quest. The branch manager questioned if this was truly necessary. Kurando, still looking at the form, admitted he didn't know, but reiterated that on the paper, he saw no difference. With a resigned sigh, the manager conceded. Sometime later, they were on the road, trekking through a snowy landscape. Areta spoke to Kurando, mentioning she'd heard he was from the outside, but that he had a family. He looked down towards Tama, the leopard cub, and replied quietly, "One person. No, one fleabag." He walked with Areta, who broke the silence to ask if he had any desire to become a hunter himself. After a pause, he explained his theory. The branch was trying to accomplish something specific and wanted to recruit experienced hunters for it. He reasoned that if he couldn't handle the task, they would simply bring in others to take his place. He continued, adding that he had nothing to lose by not becoming a hunter. Despite this, he admitted that he was still undertaking the quest for his own reasons. Areta remarked that it would be a shame for his efforts to be wasted, and that Maxim's recommendation would go down the drain as well. The name caught his attention, and he asked if she meant Maxim Dahl of the White Spear. Areta confirmed this, revealing that Maxim was the one who recommended him. She then declared that she would be watching over him until the very end, referring to him as a mistake of her youth. Her cryptic words left him puzzled. Before he could ask for clarification, the air filled with a deafening chorus of chirps. Areta suddenly grabbed him by the collar, her expression serious. They had arrived. Before them, a massive, gnarled tree stood against the sky, its branches and the surrounding air thick with a living darkness. Countless shadowy birds, the fog starlings, swarmed in a terrifying, chittering mass, their glowing eyes like 1,000 malevolent stars. Before a colossal, ancient tree teeming with small, white birds, Areta Hagen explained the nature of the creature. The entire tree, she stated, was a divine beast. She noted that while the birds typically help travelers get their bearings, they can become problematic once they grow attached to someone. She turned her skeptical gaze upon Kurando, who stood silently with Tama on his shoulder. She questioned if he truly believed he could handle such an impossible task. Now that he understood the situation, he looked towards the flock of birds nestled in the branches, his expression resolute. He simply stated that he would see what he could do. The birds merely watched him, chirping softly. Hearing his resolve, Ureta informed him of her plan. She would wait nearby, explaining that as his curator, she couldn't abandon a novice in trouble. With a determined look, she added that she had no intention of running away and would concentrate on her job. He turned to her, seeking clarification. He asked if the birds would begin to multiply should he show any aggression towards them. She looked back towards the tree, reassuring him that they wouldn't start breeding so suddenly. That would only happen, she explained, if they felt they were in danger. With that understanding, Kurando sat down cross-legged on the ground before the tree, settling in for a long wait. The birds watched him from the branches above. His vigil began. As Ureta walked away into the nearby settlement, the second day dawned with Kurando still sitting patiently in the same spot. Time passed, but the scene remained unchanged. Ureta returned with provisions, finding Kurando and Tama still waiting quietly beneath the watchful eyes of the birds. The vigil stretched on. Other travelers came and went in the distance, but Kurando and Ureta remained, their patient watch continuing under the ancient, bird-filled branches. His long vigil under the divine tree had not gone unnoticed. A crowd of townsfolk gathered, their voices a low murmur of confusion. They wondered about the man and the imposing woman who simply sat there day after day. One onlooker dismissed him as a drunkard, but another corrected them, pointing out that they were clearly hunters from a guild. Their speculation continued. One wondered if the man was perhaps an aspiring hunter himself. Another, stroking his chin, considered that they might have a plan. A third person, however, remained skeptical, suggesting that on the contrary, they had no idea what to do. By the third day, patience had begun to fray. The skeptical onlooker sneered, noting that the pair did nothing but sit, eat, and drink. Even Ureta, lounging amongst empty bottles, began to wonder if Kurando truly had a strategy, or if he would just sit there indefinitely. Then, on the fourth day, he finally moved. Kurando rose to his feet as the crowd murmured in anticipation, some calling out his name. He stood firm, his gaze fixed on the tree, confident that he could handle the birds the townsfolk called fog starlings. With a sudden, powerful shout that echoed across the clearing, he threw a small object with all his strength. The crowd watched in stunned silence, bewildered by the seemingly random act. The commotion startled the small, fluffy birds in the branches above. As they chirped in alarm, the onlookers' impatience grew. One suggested that they should just burn the tree down, arguing that it was the only one of its kind in town and the birds would simply find a new home. The sentiment found quick agreement among the others. Ignoring their talk, he turned to Ureta and asked her to fetch some ink and paper from a shop so he could properly explain his idea. With her assent, he approached the massive trunk and placed a hand upon its bark, asking the great tree for its cooperation. As she watched him, a look of understanding dawned on Ureta's face. She realized he had finally found a solution. She asked what he was thinking. In response, he showed her a meticulously detailed drawing of the divine tree, explaining that art was a hobby of his. Ureta was stunned, remarking that he was far more interesting than the average hunter. With a playful smile, she asked if he was going to get drunk again or if he would finally share his plan. His plan began at that moment. Far away, in a well-lit office, the branch manager Yakov Sergei Mazel was startled from his work by a sudden, deafening noise. A tremendous, metallic clang rang out, originating from the direction of the tree, shaking the very building around it. The source of the strange noise is the divine tree itself, now glowing with an intense light. Kurando and Ureta Hagen rush towards its base as the flock of small, white birds within its branches erupts into a cacophony of chirps. He calls out for the wind as he heaves a massive, dark net into the air. At the same time, Ureta casts a spell, commanding water to pour down and freeze, her voice ringing with urgency. The net unfurls, spreading wide over the glowing tree. She turns to him, confirming that it's now his turn. Kurando seems worried, but Ureta reassures him, stating that while it's possible, she's on the verge of exhaustion. She asks if he can really use 4 types of spirit magic simultaneously. He explains his plan. He will create a puddle around the tree and then freeze it to trap the birds for her to finish. However, she corrects him, pointing out that the net will fall before the puddle can form properly. She elaborates on the city's regulations regarding magic. First-class magic for mass destruction is forbidden. Second class, for combat, is also restricted. Only third-class magic for non-lethal daily use is commonly permitted. She explains that killing with second-class magic is not a lawful act within the city. This is why, she concludes, she needs him to perform the capture manually. She adds that using multiple types of spirit magic at once with such precision is a feat in itself. As she speaks, Kurando prepares, drawing a small, sharp tool across the feathers of a bird held in his gloved hand. With the net now fully deployed over the tree, the townsfolk murmur that the trap is set and it's all in his hands. Kurando, holding a feather, focuses his mind, sensing an immense amount of magical power for this era. The branch manager, Yakov Sergei Mazel, watches with the crowd, wondering aloud what Kurando had to endure to gain such power. Nearby, Ureta gives the signal, telling him to start the show. He acknowledges her, ready to begin. He stomps his foot hard onto the base of the tree, sending a shockwave through the ground. The sudden impact startles the birds, causing them to fly upwards in a panic. The flock flies directly into the waiting net above. At the same moment, a fire ignites at the base of a tree, its flames roaring upwards. Below, the crowd erupts in cheers, celebrating the successful capture. Their celebration is cut short as the branch manager strides forward, his expression grim. He declares their hunting method illegal and orders them to cease immediately, warning that the guild will finish the job. He questions if they're trying to usurp the right to continue the hunt. He silences the protesting townspeople with a roar, shouting for them to be quiet. He accuses them of being the reason the birds multiplied in the first place, while the crowd murmurs that he's just a swindler. He then turns his attention to Ureta, questioning what anyone could expect from a foreigner who doesn't know the rules. He asserts that, judging by the sound, the magic used was at least second class, which is strictly forbidden. He declares that everyone heard and saw it, and he will not listen to any excuses. His expression hardens into a glare as he demands to know if there was even a hint that such high-level magic was used. In the distance, Kurando and Ureta stand together, observing him silently. In response, Kurando steps forward. He calmly explains that he only used spirit magic within permissible limits, pointing out the lack of any damage. There isn't a single scratch on the tree, he notes, only a small hole in the ground. He clarifies to the branch manager and the assembled crowd that he simply returned the great tree to its original state, allowing them to harvest its fruit once more. The branch manager's face twists into a grimace of frustration, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple as he struggles to find a counterargument. Defeated and unable to refute Kurando's logic, he turns and walks away without another word. The townspeople watch him depart before turning their attention back towards the successful hunt. As he leaves, Ureta and Kurando stand before the enormous net teeming with birds. She wonders aloud what they should do with so many, thinking to herself that even with the manager gone, she wouldn't relax just yet. She suddenly has an idea, suggesting to Kurando that they should freeze the birds for now before they have a chance to wake up. Before they can proceed, the townspeople approach them. One of the men offers their collective help, stating that if they need to process all the birds, the community is ready to assist. The community immediately sets to work. Men, women, and children gather around the massive net, diligently sorting and collecting the captured birds into baskets and trays. Their collective effort yields a mountain of processed birds, piled high in sacks. As the sun sets behind a great tree on the hill, Ureta Hagen stands with her arms crossed, observing Kurando. She remarks that they won't finish in a single day and that a celebration is in order. Noting her own magical exhaustion, she tells him to get up, asking if he plans to join her for a drink. He agrees that would be nice, reflecting quietly that until now, hunters had only ever tried to kill these starlings. Ureta continues her assessment, expressing surprise at his skill and vast magical reserves, questioning if he truly has 10 stars. She correctly deduces his tactic, using the bright light and sharp sound from a stun grenade to weaken the flock. His expression grows serious as he processes her accurate analysis of his unconventional methods. Her gaze softens, a knowing smile playing on her lips as she watches him. She then delivers her final assessment, looking down at him with conviction. You don't need a curator anymore. Kurando looks up, his face a mixture of surprise and contemplation. In a tranquil clearing, Ureta Hagen stands over Hasabi Kurando, who is seated on the ground. She observes that he's like a stray cub who has been separated from its pack, noting that he's well-trained with a decent build. With a confident smile, she tells him he's now capable of hunting on his own, adding that he also seems to have a good grasp of wind magic. He looks up at her, somewhat taken aback. She continues her assessment, stating that he's worth more than 10 stars and has truly grown into a man. As they stand together, they are approached by a group of grateful townsfolk, including the white-haired warrior. He remarks that Ureta's muscles are heating up from the physical exertion of their recent battle. She gives him a curious glance as the townspeople express their immense gratitude. One of the men presents them with 2 large glass jars filled with a special alcohol made from the fruits of a divine tree. He explains that drinking it will completely erase their fatigue and insists they accept it as a token of their thanks, calling them the town's benefactors. Kurando politely accepts the gift, promising they will be sure to drink it. Ureta, however, has other plans, immediately suggesting they drink it right now. The scene shifts to a bustling local tavern, where Kurando looks surprised by her impulsive proposition. Now seated at a table, Ureta holds up one of the jars. She points out that since it's supposed to help with fatigue, he should drink with her. Seeing no reason to refuse, she declares they should just get on with it. Kurando, looking uneasy, recognizes this as a bad proposal, but understands he has little choice in the matter. He takes the jar from her, a silent question in his eyes about what she intends. She simply watches him with a knowing smile as the tavern life continues around them. Instead of drinking it straight, he reveals a more refined idea. He asks if she'd like to add a local liqueur, then explains his process. He'll add ice from an ice spirit, mix it all with water magic, and then chill it further with ice magic. Ureta listens, intrigued by his unexpected creativity. With a subtle display of power, Kurando conjures 2 sparkling cocktails in elegant glasses. Impressed, Ureta comments on his skill with magic. He simply tells her to drink in silence as he takes the first sip of his own creation. She brings the glass to her lips, closing her eyes to savor the taste of the magically crafted drink. She took a sip of the cocktail Kurando had prepared, her expression one of pleasant surprise. She remarked on the delicious balance of fruity sweetness and citrus acidity, explaining that while she'd seen the local liquor before, she had long wanted to try making a cocktail with it. The drink's color, she added, was new to her, yet it felt strangely familiar. At a nearby table, another patron overheard and commented on the rarity of cocktails in the region. He explained that due to the long winters, most locals preferred strong, straight liquor. Having traveled extensively, he noted that cocktails were only prepared in very specific places. Kurando took a thoughtful sip himself. He found it surprisingly easy to drink, though it was stronger than he had anticipated. He recalled that the alcohol was derived from the fruits of the divine tree, a substance also used medicinally to treat colds, disinfect wounds, and alleviate fatigue. She then asked what kind of alcohol he preferred, to which he gave a vague reply. Raising her glass with a determined smile, Ureta announced that it was her last day in town and insisted he drink with her until the very end. As night deepened, the snow-capped mountain stood stark against the starry sky, overlooking the warm, lively tavern and the quiet, sleeping town below. Back at their table, the celebration had clearly taken its toll. Kurando was slumped over, unconscious amidst a collection of empty glasses. Ureta looked down at him, simply stating that the cocktail was finished. The other patrons observed the scene with a mix of amusement and concern. One remarked on Ureta's impressive endurance, noting that the local alcohol combined with the fruit infusion was a notoriously potent mix. Another suggested someone should probably get the unconscious man some water. As she supported his weight and took a final drink herself, Kurando's hand shot out and gripped her wrist tightly. His eyes were wide open, burning with a sudden, fierce intensity. With a strained voice, he told her to go to the inn. Later that night, under the light of a full moon, Ureta carried the once again unconscious Kurando on her back, walking steadily through the quiet, cobblestone streets of the town. By morning, the first rays of sunlight crested the mountains, spilling over the rooftops. Light streamed through the slats of a closed wooden shutter, marking the arrival of a new day. In a dimly lit room, the morning light reveals a scene of disarray. Clothes and boots are scattered across the wooden floor beside a heavily rumpled bed. Amidst the chaos, Hasebi Kurando sits up, clutching his head in a clear sign of a severe hangover. He collapses back onto the pillows, his expression weary and unfocused. A sudden, sharp pang of nausea or a fragmented memory strikes him. He covers his mouth, his eyes wide with distress as a guttural sound escapes him. He scrambles out of bed, stumbling frantically towards the bathroom. Outside the inn window, the sun rises over a field of white flowers, casting its light on the distant, snow-capped mountains. The mountain air is crisp and still. In a quiet town below, birds begin to chirp and flutter along a stone wall, signaling the start of a new day. Returning from the washroom with a towel, Kurando pauses. A realization dawns on him. This is not his room. He mutters to himself about needing to strengthen his liver, lamenting that he has no magic to help with the task. His eyes then fall upon the bed, and he freezes. A figure is lying there, still asleep under the covers. His expression shifts from confusion to shock. The person in the bed stirs, revealing herself to be Ureta Hagen. Propping herself up, she asks what's wrong, wondering if he's having a nightmare. Kurando, clutching a sheet to his chest, demands to know why she is dressed, or undressed, in such a way. She sits up further, a playful look on her face, and tells him to try and guess what happened. The implication makes Kurando recoil in panic. He stammers that he can't remember anything at all, pointing a trembling finger at her in utter confusion. He continues to stammer, unable to form a coherent thought. Ureta calmly asks if it looks like they're preparing for a wedding. Utterly flustered, Kurando can only manage a week, I don't know, before retreating into an adjacent room and shutting the door. He retreats to the adjoining room, splashing his face with water while agonizing over the thought that she must see him as a virgin. From the bedroom, Ureta's voice cuts through his turmoil, telling him not to worry, as nothing actually happened between them. Her words do little to soothe him. He mutters that no one would believe her, convinced that she doesn't even see him as a man. She watches him, her expression unreadable. Standing and wrapping a sheet around herself, she tells him to close the door, finding it improper for him to watch her like this. She clarifies that she isn't desperate enough to call a drunken encounter love, then pointedly asks if he's truly not a virgin, musing that if he were, there would have been a great deal of blood. The comment seems to drain the last of his strength. He slumps forward, weakly reaching out before asking in a defeated tone what they're supposed to do now. In response, Ureta strides to the window and throws open the wooden shutters, flooding the dark room with brilliant morning light. She settles onto the windowsill, the light framing her as small birds gather around. She looks out thoughtfully and trails off, and now, sometime later, Kurando officially became a rank 10 hunter in the guild. With his new status, he and Tama pass through the town gates. He heads back into the formidable, snow-covered mountains, accepting a request to gather herbs along the way. 3 months passed in this manner. He continued his training with Akari, learning swordsmanship and sorcery. His mock battles with the great snow leopard, Yukishiro, forged him into a stronger warrior. He also occasionally brought medicine to the village chief and presented his documents to the guild. During this time, He visits a local shop to purchase a large quantity of paper. When the elderly shopkeeper asks why he needs so much, Kurando explains with a smile that he loves to draw, noting that while this paper is inexpensive, it isn't very durable. He sat sketching in a bustling town square, capturing the lively scene in his book. Nearby, the formidable hunter Rita Hagen stood with her hands bound, a detail that drew whispers from the crowd. Some gossiped about another hunter, Sol, and his group, remarking on how they were barely scraping by on small jobs. She approached him with a warm smile, noting that it had been a long time since they'd last seen each other. Turning to the onlookers, she told them to pay no mind, dismissing their talk as simple jealousy of a so-called vagrant. She then asked Kurando how he had been. She then called him over, getting straight to the point. Kurando asked why she had sought him out. Ureda explained that she was leaving soon and, remembering his need to travel to other countries, thought he might be able to help her with a task in the Alerkian Mountains. She turned to address the assembled group of hunters, Kurando among them. She announced that the season for the Shalobisin had arrived, and that she was looking for people to work together on a hunt. She scanned the faces of the potential recruits, gauging their interest. She elaborated on the situation, explaining that the creatures migrate to the area at this time of year to give birth and feed on grass balls. Controlling their numbers manually is a necessity. She warned that if the bison began to defend themselves as a herd, they would be impossible to handle. Confident, she declared she would take the job and asked if anyone would join her, suggesting 2 people would be enough. In a bustling, rustic hall filled with adventurers, Kurando stands alone until a tall, muscular woman with light, wavy hair approaches him. She greets him warmly, noting it's been a while and asking how he is. From across the room, another hunter calls out his name, beckoning him to join the crowd. The woman then turns to address the entire hall, proposing that they work together. She suggests they look into a quest involving a shelled bison, mentioning that it's a popular local delicacy. Kurando listens from the back of the crowd, a silent question forming in his mind. She elaborates that the bison give birth around this time, making them extremely aggressive, and their sheer numbers make it a job for a large party. Another hunter questions the decision, but the woman confidently states that with enough people, the task will be manageable, warning that those who can't handle it shouldn't even try. As the crowd murmurs, one of the hunters apologizes to the tall woman, admitting he was simply in awe of her. From the edge of the group, Kurando watches the interaction, his expression impassive. A young woman with wavy, light-colored hair and ornate gauntlets steps forward. She introduces herself as Erika Kiritani, a 6-star hunter. Kurando observes her, a piece of straw still held in his mouth, as the tall woman looks on. Following this, the tall woman formally introduces herself as Alida, also a 6-star hunter. She addresses the group, stating that with Kurando joining them, their numbers for the quest will be sufficient. The assembled hunters gather before a large board covered in quest notices. A murmur goes through the crowd as someone points out that the leader of a party called Wings of Night is merely a 1-star hunter. The name of that hunter is Hayato Ichihara. The name triggers a memory for Kurando, a flash of Ichihara's determined face. Back in the present, Alida looks over the newly formed group and asks if they are ready to cooperate. Erika reacts with shock, her hand flying to her mouth as she questions why a 10-star hunter is being paired with a 4-star. Alida calmly holds up 3 fingers, explaining that she has an urgent matter to attend to and cannot participate. Her sudden withdrawal leaves Erika stunned. She watched him leave, a look of concern on her face. The tall woman beside her, Zenaida, cautioned that one must be careful with someone like him, but Erika Kiritani was too flustered to respond, exclaiming that he was late. Her thoughts were interrupted by a powerful silhouette appearing in the guild hall's brightly lit doorway. A voice called out, announcing the arrival of Lord Hayato. In response, she quickly moved through the crowd of watching hunters and grabbed his arm, stopping his advance. He quietly told her not to be so loud before asking if she had made a decision about the quest. Erika confirmed they would take it, along with the shelled bison hunt. Hayato then added that Zenaida would be joining their party. He then formally introduced himself as Hayato Ichihara, declaring it an honor to meet her. The other woman stepped forward, introducing herself as Zenaida Hagen and expressing her pleasure in working together. As this happened, Erika couldn't help but think that Kurando had left because of Hayato's arrival. His gaze was intense as he looked at Erika. He sensed an incredible courage from her, a powerful light. Meanwhile, far from the guild hall, Kurando journeyed alone through a vast, snowy mountain range. He had planned to leave the country once his task was complete, but now he felt it was better to stay. He believed it was necessary, and he was happy with his choice. His journey led him to a remote mountain clearing. There, Akari Fudishiro knelt before the small snow leopard cub, Tama, who rolled playfully on its back in the grass. The peaceful moment was interrupted by Kurando's approach. Akari looked up and greeted him, remarking on his early return as Tama purred beside her. He approached her, explaining that he had been to the city. Akari's eyes widened in shock when he mentioned meeting Hayato Ichihara. As they spoke, dozens of other snow leopard cubs suddenly appeared, swarming around them playfully. Kurando felt it would be best to leave. He remained silent as Akari explained what she knew of Hayato Ichihara. She revealed that he possesses a star and holds a certain authority, likely due to his lineage. Kurando expressed his surprise, stating that Maxim had never mentioned any of this. Akari surmised that these details must have been part of his official registration. She continued, adding that Hayato also has a dragon. If he were to defeat one that attacked a city, he would receive an immediate promotion. Kurando was stunned by this revelation. Akari clarified that while dragons rarely show themselves to people, it is a known fact that slaying a flying dragon is a feat of incredible magnitude. This led her to a rumor she had heard, that Hayato had already slain a dragon that attacked a city. For the people who had fought against such a beast for so long, sacrificing countless lives, the appearance of a being powerful enough to fell it single-handedly would be a terrifying prospect, signifying the arrival of an even greater danger on the horizon. The unspoken implication was clear. Inevitably, someone would want to kill him for possessing such power. The thought manifested as an image of a hand gripping a knife, ready to strike. This grim line of thought was suddenly broken by the playful tumbling of the snow leopard cubs around their feet. Akari knelt to offer one a piece of food, remarking that it had already eaten. Kurando watched the scene with a heavy heart, admitting he didn't want things to come to that. Akari agreed, though she acknowledged that in this world, anything was possible. She added that she didn't deny his belief that proving his guilt would be impossible. As they turned and walked toward the mouth of a nearby cave, Akari placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. She declared that from now on, between the two of them, there would only be truth. Once inside, Kurando fell to his knees, overcome with guilt. He apologized, insisting it was all his fault. Akari looked down at him, her mind racing. She concluded Hayato had come for her, either to kill her or for some other purpose. She recalled seeing him with his party, noting his self-assuredness and the heavy responsibility he seemed to carry, with so many people now under his protection. Her thoughts delved deeper into the mechanics of their powers. She reasoned that even if they were attacked, Hayato could use his ability, but her own power wouldn't extend to him or his companions. To become truly independent, she must hide her eyes. If one uses the gift of the spirits, as they do, the power is nullified against another user. In essence, a hero's gift doesn't work on another hero. This led her to question the true meaning of her scythe of truth. However, a glowing arrow of light manifested in the darkness of her thoughts, representing a critical piece of information. There is an exception to this rule. The gift can, in fact, work when one hero accepts the gift of another. Kurando considers the situation, his gaze distant. He explains that since he was never in a hostile position with them, he can't definitively say what would have happened. Suddenly, the scene shifts violently. In a field of white flowers, a young woman collapses to the ground, her eyes wide with shock and terror as two men loom over her. One of the assailants pins her down. She struggles, screaming for them to stop as his face twists into a brutish expression, ignoring her desperate pleas. He leans close, tauntingly asking if she is red. As tears stream down her face, she wonders if she'll be exposed. With a surge of defiance, she strikes him hard across the cheek. The aftermath is stark. The two attackers lie defeated on the barren ground. The woman sits apart, shaken, apologizing to Kurando, who is nearby. She laments that they should have found another way, but he hadn't believed her. Her apology triggers a painful memory for him. He sees Akari, tears in her eyes, also apologizing. She had told him she couldn't convey the truth of things, and that he hadn't become red. The scene shifts to an earlier time at a cave entrance. Akari tells Kurando she is going hunting and will return in 2 hours, leaving him in charge. As she departs with Yukishiro, she calls out his name, but he seems lost in thought. Later, Akari greets a returning Maxim doll. He points towards a distant ridge, explaining he saw something on his way back. Kurando and Akari look to where he indicates, spotting a group of people gathered in what she recognizes as a secret place. This sight triggers another memory in Kurando. He recalls a massive, white-haired warrior standing before him in the pouring rain, stating plainly, "I just want to live quietly and peacefully." His face hardens, eyes filled with a cold fury. He thinks of the warrior as a bastard who couldn't even keep his promise. In the heart of a vast, snow-covered mountain range, Kurando and Akari continue their journey, accompanied by the great snow leopard, Yukishiro. The beast snarls softly, its senses on high alert, while Kurando's gaze remains fixed forward, his expression a mask of grim determination. His hand instinctively moves closer to his weapon as he takes in the scene before them, a large, waiting contingent. At their head stands a powerfully built, white-haired warrior. The warrior observes Yukishiro's wariness, noting that the beast seems cautious of Kurando as well, just as he had thought. He identifies Akari by name. The white-haired warrior addresses Kurando directly, remarking on how guarded he is for someone so young. He speculates that Kurando must have other methods at his disposal. Beside him, a hooded figure smiles faintly, agreeing that they are indeed very young. As the hooded figure pulls back their cowl, revealing the pointed ears and serene face of an elf, Kurando flinches. The sudden movement startles him, his guard raised even higher as he, Akari, and Yukishiro face the silent, robed crowd. The elf leader introduces themselves as Orf, the leader of the followers of the moon goddess. They stand before their congregation, a diverse group of men, women, and children, as Kurando listens with a wary expression. Upon hearing this, Akari gasps in disbelief. Orf turns to the white-haired warrior, revealing his name is Maxim, and explains that they were the one who requested his presence. Orf assures them they have no intention of disturbing their lives, but have come specifically because of Kurando, whom they intend to escort. Orf speaks with reverence, describing the legends told about them, envisioning a noble spirit residing within Kurando, a heroic figure standing beside a majestic Yukishiro. This grand expectation contrasts sharply with the reality, a confused Kurando and a distinctly unimpressed leopard. While Maxim mutters something unheard, Orf continues, expressing their gladness at having lived long enough to witness this day. They take full responsibility for the meeting, asking Kurando not to blame Maxim, as they came for the sole purpose of seeing him. Maxim sighs and rubs the back of his neck, then turns to his followers and announces that they will need to make camp here. Kurando's eyes narrow in frustration. He feels trapped, with no apparent way out of the situation. As Akari steps forward, Orf raises a hand to stop her. Not you, the elf states, their gaze fixed on Kurando. May I speak with you, Lord Yukishiro? The unexpected title hangs in the air, leaving both Kurando and Akari stunned and confused, while the small cub Tama peeks out from behind Akari's leg. He reacts with stunned disbelief. Orf, the elven leader, calmly explains that permission was granted, so there is no issue. Maxim adds that this time, everything will take place within the sanctuary. Akari, surprised, asks if that means always Semai will be there. Orf clarifies that the sanctuary is occupied only by their representatives, and that they had already scouted the mountain to assess the situation. Maxim elaborates, his expression grim, stating that waiting for matters to resolve in the city would have been pure suicide. He suggests that something unpleasant was bound to happen, which is why they had no choice but to select this remote location. The group has established a camp in a stark, rocky basin. Silhouetted against the light, Kurando and Akari stand together, observing the settlement where an elderly woman from the group tends to a small child. He kneels beside Yukishiro, his mind racing. He wonders why he always finds himself in such situations, surrounded by so many different people. His gaze is distant, lost in thought. As he observes the diverse crowd, he asks Orf if this is unusual. The elf explains that while the majority are human, the other races live separately, noting that such discrimination is everywhere. However, he continues, they all share a single aspiration, to live under the protection of their goddess. Kurando realizes with a start that they are all hunters. Orf continues, revealing they are all followers of the moon goddess. He explains that their goddess is pure and dislikes the opposite sex, and therefore, men are forbidden within their circle. Akari reacts in shock to this revelation, but before she can speak, Maxim firmly grasps her arm, telling her she doesn't understand. Maxim tells Akari he will explain everything and that she should follow him. As they are led into the darkness of the cave, Akari questions what is happening. In the dim light, Kurando reaches out and takes her hand, their eyes meeting in the gloom. She pulls her hand away, turning from him. I'm sorry, she murmurs, believing it is all her fault. He steps closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Inside the cave, he asks if she told Maxim about the invitation. Akari insists it was a promise, not an invitation. Kurando concedes the point, acknowledging that Maxim likely couldn't have saved her otherwise. He admits that while it caused him trouble, he never intended to accept it positively anyway. He continues, telling her it wasn't as if he had no other means of escape. He urges her not to look so distraught, reminding her that she is a victim in this as well. He declares that if this place doesn't work out, he'll simply head for the desert. He looked at Akari, reminding her not to forget her promise. She must hold on to it until the very end. Beyond that, he assured her she had nothing to worry about, as he lived by the same principle. His expression grew distant as he thought to himself that he, too, carried something from his past that he was obligated to always remember. He, Akari, and the snow leopard stood together at the mouth of the cave. Suddenly, a cheerful voice declared that hiding was useless. A young girl with cat ears and a tail bounded into view, her eyes locking onto Yukishiro. She shouted with glee that she had found a flying snow leopard and that it wouldn't escape her. With a manic grin and swirling eyes, the girl lunged forward, vowing that she would absolutely pet the creature. Below, Yukishiro watched her frenzied approach with a look of utter indifference. A short while later, Kurando emerged from the cave, carrying the now unconscious girl over his shoulder. He, Akari, and Yukishiro were met by the imposing, silent figures of Maxim and the elven leader, Orf. Surrounded by the other followers, Orf introduced the girl as Mana, noting her love for cats. Just then, Mana awoke, spotted Yukishiro, and began struggling, desperate to pet him. Kurando asked Yukishiro if he knew her, but the great cat ignored the commotion, leaving the others to wonder if he could even understand them. The elven leader formally introduced himself to Kurando. Orf, he said with a serene smile. You are an elf? Kurando asked. Orf confirmed this, adding that while some call his kind forest dwellers, he much prefers the term elf. Hearing this, Kurando's expression hardened with purpose. He addressed the gathered followers, asking what they thought of dependency magic. He acknowledged that ordinary elves might not handle it well, but he knew a few things. He then made a direct request to Orf. While you are here, teach me. He glanced toward Akari, stating that it would be very good to possess such knowledge. Turning back to Orf, he declared that if the elf agreed to teach him, then he would accept them. Knowledge, he concluded, is never a waste. Orf smiled and accepted the deal, promising to teach Kurando the sources of his independent magic. Kurando asked if that would be enough, and Orf confirmed it, explaining that he could teach spirit magic and life magic, but everything must start somewhere. Kurando agreed, saying they had nothing to lose and would proceed slowly. He stood by as the white-haired warrior, Maxim, looked on in confusion, asking what they had been talking about. Orf explained that their group helps the poor from many nations by destroying demons. Akari elaborated, stating that the followers of the Moon Goddess are not simple hunters. They have a long history and were instrumental in founding the Hunters Guild, the precursor to the Hunters Association. She asserted that they are the only organization, apart from the government, with influence over the association. Hearing this, Maxim seemed satisfied, agreeing to their terms and remarking to Mana that this was a good development. As Akari continued her explanation, Orf placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She recounted how they were involved in the very creation of the Hunters Guild and continued to support it through times of chaos. While they hold no official punitive power, she explained, their influence is undeniable. No organization would dare ignore their words. For the followers, strength commands respect. Orf then turned his attention to Kurando, a knowing smile on his face. He clarified that while they do not interfere in politics, it does not mean they will simply stand aside and do nothing. Addressing him as Lord Kurando, he left the implication hanging in the air, contingent on Kurando's own intentions. Kurando simply acknowledged that he understood. His smile vanished, replaced by a cold intensity. Holding Akari protectively, Orf vowed that they would absolutely punish anyone who dared to defile them. His voice was low and menacing as he delivered the final, chilling warning. Anyone who touches the body of the goddess will be frozen solid, then shattered into dust. Kurando's expression hardened, his resolve solidifying in the face of the elf's threat. The elven leader, Orf, offers a gentle smile, assuring the group that they will speak later. For now, she states she must help. Following her, Kurando walks towards a small settlement of yurts. He suddenly pauses, a troubled look crossing his face as he wonders if he just felt a strange pressure. Nearby, the veteran warrior Maxim also halts, letting out a grunt of surprise. He turns to Kurando and Mana, confirming that it wasn't their imagination. Mana agrees. As they speak, Orf is warmly greeted by her people, who explain that she has been the strongest leader in their history for over 200 years. Maxim elaborates that Orf is something of a fanatic, which is why she is so revered. He recounts how she saved countless civilians during the Great World War, earning her the title of a true saint. Kurando listens, a complex mix of emotions causing him to both laugh and cry. The group is led to a vast dwelling carved into the side of a mountain. Inside the cavernous space, Orf explains that this is where they live now. She gestures to a simple bed in the corner, stating that in the future, it will belong to Yukishiro. She then introduces her deputies, a young girl named Ari of the White Race, and a woman named Diantia of the Crystal Steel Race. Both offer pleasant greetings to the newcomers. After the introductions, the group gathers around a glowing dish in the center of the room. Orf's expression becomes serious as she turns to Kurando, asking him to tell them everything that happened in Sailkata. As Kurando hesitates, Orf presses on, stating that they need proof. She explains that what he is describing is a gross misinterpretation and misuse of their rules, an abuse of their system of compulsory requests. She calls the perpetrators unpleasant people, warning that without evidence, they will simply get away with it. In response, Kurando presents a document, stating that he won't claim he's leaving a memory for survival. Orf takes the paper, her eyes widening in shock. She demands to know where he got the copy, questioning if it's an order form. He feels a strange sensation as the elves around him begin a special song, a chant he recognizes as a form of autonomous magic. Orf, the elven leader, holds up a tag on a chain, explaining that as a sign of trust, she must first read his adventurer's tag. After examining it, she notes that there are no records beyond his first hunt. Kurando confirms this, explaining that he undertook some quests with Ureta Hagen, who took care of him. Hearing the name, Diantia asks if Ureta is also present. Orf states that the tag holds no such memories, but they can simply ask Ureta directly. She then turns to the young elf, Ari, and instruct her to travel with Maxim to the town of Sailhat at dawn. Ari calmly agrees. As the arrangements are made, Orf's expression hardens. She reflects that their enemy is cunning, and they must act carefully so as not to reveal any weakness. The next morning, Orf approaches Kurando and Yukishiro in the snowy landscape. Before she can ask about his preparations, he asks how she learned magic before the current system existed. Surprised, she holds up a thick, leather-bound book, identifying it as the Encyclopedia of Elven Magic, which she read because she had nothing else to do during the winter. She then reveals a startling fact. She wrote the book herself. Kurando is stunned. Orf explains that she was asked to write a textbook about 150 years ago, but the title and author's name were changed, which is why it turned out the way it did. She continues, clarifying that the original text described autonomous magic, spirit magic, and many other complex forms. However, a war was raging at the time, and under pressure from the elves, human royalty, and aristocrats confiscated the book. Kurando, having studied it well, notes that such things happen often. Closing the tome, Orf looks at him with understanding. She concludes that since he had the time to study her work so thoroughly, he must know the fundamentals of magic. He clarifies, however, that he has no experience in actually creating autonomous magic. A memory of an aristocrat mentioning a magic arrow comes to mind. Orf realizes that he knows the source of the knowledge but lacks practical application. He explains that this particular magic is for hunters and is activated by funds. One can buy as many arrows as they can afford. Understanding this, he asks Orf which 3 autonomous magics she wants him to learn, acknowledging that the great power needed is currently impossible for him to wield. He asked if there is a simpler way. He stated the 3 autonomous magics he wished to learn: liberation, barrier, poison. He confirmed his choice was firm. Orf acknowledged his request, noting that these were very specific skills. She cautioned him that the barrier magic, for instance, would not activate without a clear opponent. With that understanding, she agreed to teach him, on the condition that he not misuse the power or speak of it to anyone. As they stood in the desolate mountain landscape, observed from a distance by Ari and Diantia, Kurando vowed to work hard. Later, finding shelter in a cave, he sat beside Yukishiro, enveloped by the profound quiet. Orf joined them inside, her attention captured by ancient paintings on the cave walls. She commented on the beautiful white and black images. Kurando seemed confused by her focus, but Orf, glancing between him and the great leopard, simply acknowledged that she understood Yukishiro was an unexpected guest. She then thanked Kurando for taking him in. He looked away, filled with remorse, confessing that it was his fault for believing empty promises, which in turn forced Maxim into his current situation. Orf gently corrected him, stating that this was her responsibility, not his. Kurando remained unconvinced, arguing that Maxim wasn't the kind of man to show pity just because they lived in the mountains. He lamented that no one would investigate to find the truth of the matter. These feelings began to weigh on him. His turmoil erupted as he turned to Orf, asking if she expected him to abandon the rest of the world and simply stay there forever, even if it meant his death. His intense gaze met hers for a moment before he turned away, his anger softening as he reached out to stroke Yukishiro's head. Under the moonlight, he spoke quietly to the great beast, admitting that staying here wouldn't be so bad. He then asked Yukishiro for a promise, even if it was only one made in words. Orf's voice interrupted his thoughts. She warned him never to speak to anyone else about what he had just told her. Head bowed, Kurando wondered why he was once again placing his trust in something so fragile. He sat with his back to her, hand resting on Yukishiro. He considered the promise, knowing it would cause problems. Yet he saw dark utility in it. If the promise were broken, he could allow himself to hate with his entire soul. It was a way, he decided, to kill his emotions and avoid attachment. His new surroundings were a bustling settlement, a camp filled with the white-robed followers of the moon goddess. Here, among them, he stood with Orf and Yukishiro, having made his choice. He had thought as much. Looking at the serene elf, Kurando reaffirmed his resolve. This was the path he had to take. In response, Orf placed a hand over his heart. He promised to fulfill his end of the bargain, introducing himself formally as Orf, a resident of the forest, and swearing a solemn oath to the moon goddess that he would not break his word. The elf continued his vow with poetic gravity, declaring that his oath would remain unbroken through the changing seasons, even if his body were broken and bound. His intentions would not waver until he returned to the forest. The ritual complete, he looked to Kurando and asked if it would suffice. Then, Orf's serious demeanor melted into a gentle smile. He confessed he never thought he'd use those words, but that the promise itself was the important part. He then revealed their origin. They were just a common marriage vow. Kurando could only stare back, sweating and utterly bewildered by the revelation. The world around him vanished. Suddenly, he was on a desolate battlefield, the ground littered with corpses under a dark, swirling sky. Before his own trembling hands, a sphere of pure, dark energy pulsed ominously on the blood-soaked earth. The memory had seized him completely. Before the twisted, lifeless form of a monstrous creature, Hasebi Kurando stares with wide, shocked eyes. He reflects on his own blunder, feeling an awkward sense of responsibility for the scene. He is soon surrounded by a group of robed elves. Their leader, Orf, explains that Maxim's words prompted this action. Orf presents the snow leopard, Yukishiro, as proof of identity, a sacred beast of the Maruna people. He clarifies that while this creature will allow Kurando to leave the city without a legitimate cause, even a powerful monster cannot prevent the severe consequences that will follow. Orf's expression grows grim as he elaborates on the danger. He warns that all of the Maruna people will become their enemies, and perhaps even the entire Hunters Association itself. Despite the dire warning, Kurando sits beside the great leopard, stroking Yukishiro's spotted fur. The beast remains perfectly calm under his touch. The entire procession, including Maxim, Akari, Fujishiro, and the robed followers, begins to move through the barren landscape. As they walk, a sense of anxiety and doubt begins to creep into Kurando's mind. He turns to Orf, admitting his confusion over the sheer volume of recent events. He confesses that he doesn't understand at all. As the group travel through a forest under the full moon, the two elven women, Diantia and Ari, speak privately. Diantia explains their nomadic lifestyle, noting that society often disapproves. She recounts a dark history of persecution, where their people were hunted, their women treated as rare prizes, and their race nearly wiped out. She sadly concludes that some people still hold these views. Orf echoes this sentiment to Kurando as they gaze upon a distant mountain range. He clarifies that the men of their race are not spared, suffering from the same prejudice. They are often sent into meaningless wars or killed for sport. He turns his piercing gaze on Kurando. Orf suggests that Kurando is no exception to this suffering, that something or someone must have wounded him deeply as well. Finally, Orf reveals his true purpose. He explains that he wishes to protect not only the helpless women of his kind, but also the oppressed men. He heard a rumor that Kurando was a woman who had survived great hardship, and this spurred a desire to see such a miraculous person for himself. That, he states, is why he came. He offered to teach Kurando the silent, autonomous magic of illusion as a token of gratitude, though not as a formal gift. As they walked through the stone passage, Orf advised him that while the snow leopard was well known in Dalgan, it would be best not to draw undue attention to himself. This offer prompted a deep introspection in Kurando, recalling a time when his only concern was survival. Now, with Yukishiro by his side, he questioned what had changed within him. He stood on a rocky precipice, the wind whipping around him, and wondered if merely surviving was no longer enough. Several days later, while running through the desolate, snowy landscape, a massive explosion erupted in the distance, shaking the very ground. The source of the cataclysm was certainly not what Kurando had hoped to see. From the epicenter of the blast, the veteran warrior Maxim emerged, roaring his return and demanding to know if his arrival had been announced. The display of power left Maxim thoroughly impressed. He watched as Kurando simultaneously manifested 6 different forms of magic: a water orb, a wind vortex, an ice blade, a light sphere, a cloak of lightning, and tendrils of darkness. Maxim chuckled, remarking how fun it was to play with magic, while Orf agreed it was an amusing sight. He remarked that it was amazing Kurando could achieve such a thing through self-study alone, a crude practice that even the elves avoided. As Maxim wondered aloud how far Kurando could go, he suddenly grabbed the young man's hands, startling Diantha and telling him to concentrate. Maxim mused that Kurando seemed to have his magic under control. Orf elaborated, explaining that while spirit magic is special, the user's aura is what accomplishes everything. They were witnessing the development of a conscious habit. Maxim acknowledged it as a good observation, as Kurando effortlessly manipulated the swirling elements around him. Kurando's expression hardened with understanding. This power was no accident. It was the crystallization of his daily, relentless efforts. Maxim agreed, casually mentioning that he had also boasted when he managed to acquire a souvenir pouch through his own hard work. His focus then shifted to a quieter scene. The young elf, Ari, sat with Yukishiro, her cheeks full of food. A hand extended a sack of fresh vegetables, a valuable commodity in the district, with the simple wisdom that a healthy body is built on healthy food. He watches as preparations are made for the hunt. Orf instructs Maxim to leave one of the Yukishiro behind. Kurando addresses the elves and followers, telling them to eat and behave while he is away. One of the elves remarks that seeing a muzzled Yukishiro is a rare sight indeed. With a large basket of provisions strapped to his back, Maxim begins his departure. He offers a quick apology for the trouble as the followers see him off. Orf watches him go, his expression thoughtful and silent. He waves a cheerful goodbye to the small crowd, his demeanor generous and carefree. Kurando watches him, reflecting that Maxim is a man with a strong sense of duty and that he often finds himself worrying about the warrior. As the followers thank Maxim for everything he's given them, he kneels, telling them it's worth it if they survive. Witnessing this, Kurando's expression hardens. He resolves that if this mountain becomes Maxim's grave on his account, it is something he will never forget, though perhaps, eventually, he could forgive. Sometime later, his body gives out. He collapses, his magical power completely depleted. Mana rushes to his side in concern as Orf and Ari look on. Ari notes that he barely managed to fulfill his end of their agreement before passing out. The profound exhaustion sends him into a deep sleep, where he dreams of the hunt. He finds himself surrounded by the Yukishiro, too tired to move as they gently paw and nuzzle him. He is violently startled awake by the rough tongue of a Yukishiro licking his face. His scream of surprise causes the great cat to jolt, sending Mana, who had been resting on its back, flying through the air. From a distance, Maxim remarks that the morning sun ought to be more refreshing than this. After the chaotic awakening, Orf notices a round shield that Kurando is holding. The elf leader asks where he got it. Kurando looks down, explaining that it seems to have been purified by the paws of the Yukishiro. Orf's expression turns serious, suggesting that training can wait. As Mana excitedly declares her intent to catch a creature called an and dashes off, Orf continues his discussion with Kurando. He proposes they investigate the monsters, regardless of their forms. Kurando agrees, lamenting that the number of their crimes has grown and that he can't believe such a fundamental detail escaped his notice. Orf states with certainty that the shield was once equipped by a monster born of a starving spirit. He points out that several frolicking ice spirits have already gathered around the purified object and advises Kurando to keep an eye on it. In the distance, Mana begins to scale a sheer cliff face. He watches as Mana greets the great snow leopard with a boisterous, "Good morning." The cat girl playfully raises her hands, declaring that by doing so, she can create an ice barrier. Orf observes her antics, noting that her efforts are useless. The group's attention turns as Maxim joins them. He asks Kurando if the shield he gave to Akari also possesses magic, and Kurando confirms it. Maxim remarks that while the item appears flimsy, it is indeed useful. With their paths diverging, Kurando, holding the small leopard cub, asks if they have reached their destination. Maxim clarifies that while he and Orf are descending into the city, Kurando has a different matter to attend to. He then turns to Orf, stating with grim determination that he will act as a guard for the leader of the moon goddess followers, known as the White Spear. Orf retorts sharply, calling him a fool for not understanding the true weight of responsibility that comes with power. Several days pass. Maxim, now traveling with Mana and Kurando, lets out a booming laugh as they approach a massive stone gate. Kurando looks up at the imposing structure and wonders aloud if they have arrived too early. He grips his large club, explaining that Orf, the leader of the moon goddess followers, is on his way. Before that, however, Maxim declares his intent to first confront the immature and self-important guildmaster. With a deep rumbling sound, the heavy wooden gate begins to slide open. Maxim's stern expression softens into a gentle smile as he sees the figures waiting for him on the other side. As the gate opens completely, Orf, the young elf Ari, and a tall, wavy-haired woman are revealed. Ari waves enthusiastically, and the woman stands with a serene expression, welcoming their arrival. In the deep shadows, the veteran warrior Maxim stands, his powerful form barely illuminated as he grips a massive weapon, his expression grim and unreadable. The following morning, he operates the heavy chains of a drawbridge as the warrior Alita approaches, greeting him with a cheerful remark about the beautiful day. Behind her, Ureta, Ari, and Mana watch on. In a sudden blur of motion, Alita lunges, her weapon clashing against Maxim's with enough force to shatter the stone beneath them. As he parries, Maxim thoughtfully strokes his beard, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, as he muses that he has seen her fighting style somewhere before. His contemplation breaks into a hearty laugh. He bellows that it was a great shake-up, complimenting Alita on her excellent form. She, in turn, looks on with a weary and slightly exasperated expression. Nearby, the elf leader Orf cuts the moment short. He declares that the pleasantries have gone on long enough, and that there is no time to waste on habits. He wants to proceed to the second half of the association's agenda. He turns his attention to Alita, reminding her that she must be aware of the news that gives him no room for complacency. Though they were scheduled to visit the association the next day, he explains that today they must analyze the report on the fossils they see. As Orf speaks, Maxim's mind wanders to Kurando's small, round shield. He recalls the item, a piece created by an all-powerful monster spirit. The scene shifts to a vast, snowy mountainscape where Alita gives her report to Orf. She states that she and Yukishiro have patrolled the mountains several times, but have found no trace of any monsters other than the one they were tracking, considering this to be significant evidence. She continues, confirming that the servants of the moon goddess will cooperate, though it is hard to believe a being of such power would leave so little behind. Her words overlay a grim tableau, a desolate field littered with the giant carcasses of worm-like creatures, at the center of which the deranged ice spirit kneels, its body fractured and broken. The memory concludes with the monster's final moments. The ice spirit erupts in a silent, violent explosion, shattering into countless crystalline fragments. Where the creature fell, a field of ice flowers bloomed, marking the end of the monster. Its battle was a maelstrom of destruction. The deranged ice spirit, a towering figure of crystalline fury, was beset on all sides by a writhing tide of countless insectoid monsters, their bodies piling up amidst the carnage. The sheer number of assailants was staggering, a relentless wave of claws and teeth. Amidst the chaos, Kurando and a wavy-haired warrior fought desperately, but the woman's face was a mask of horror as the monstrous horde threatened to engulf everything. The ferocity of the conflict was so immense that its effects were felt far and wide. The mountains themselves seemed to burn, stained a bloody red under a dark sky. From the peaks, the great snow leopard, Yukishiro, let out a furious, echoing roar. But that cataclysm was in the past. In a quieter moment, Kurando spoke gently to Mana, calling her Little Miss Cat. He told her it was time to stop for the day and head back to the camp, while the leopard cub Tama watched for nearby. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, a troubled expression crossing his features. He thought to himself that he needed to go and check on things, perhaps to notify Diantia of the recent events. His concerns led him, and others, back to civilization. They arrived at a fortified town, its stone walls and wooden bridges a stark contrast to the wild mountains they had left behind. Within the town, a diverse group, led by the veteran warrior Maxim and the formidable Alita, approached a large, official-looking building. They were accompanied by the young elf Ari, the energetic Mana, and other followers in white robes. They gathered inside, where Orf addressed them with authority. He instructed everyone to take up their positions, emphasizing that it didn't matter who they were or how many there were. Their task was to prevent anyone from entering or leaving. His gaze was firm and resolute as he made his purpose clear. He announced his identity, Orf, head of the Sisterhood of the Moon Goddess, and stated that he had come with a request. He wished to see the head of the guild branch. His arrival caused a stir within the guild hall. The clerk at the counter looked up, startled, as the other hunters and patrons turned to stare at the newcomers, their expressions a mixture of surprise, suspicion, and curiosity. A cry of sheer terror escapes a man in a formal suit as he stares out a window. His face is a mask of horror, eyes wide and pupils constricted, fixed on the distant, snow-covered peaks. The source of his fear lies in a memory of the recent past, high on those same mountains. There, Kurando explains to Akari that he cannot afford to be distracted by their concerns. He stands with the young elf, Ari, and the great snow leopard, Yukishiro, looking out over the rugged terrain. He turns to Akari, his expression hardening with resolve. He tells her that his primary duty is to protect her, but to do so, he needs her abilities. Akari, overwhelmed, can only apologize, tears welling in her eyes. She feels helpless, confessing that this is the first time she has ever felt so lost and terrified. Meanwhile, back in the present, the branch manager, Yakov Sergei Mazel, puts on a welcoming smile. He greets Orf and his followers, which include the formidable Maxim and the warrior Alida, expressing what an honor it is to receive them after their long journey. He continues his pleasantries, acknowledging that the Alerpkian mountains are teeming with monsters that only the most skilled hunters can handle. He notes that their numbers are so great, they pose a threat to the entire region. With a grand gesture, he offers the full support of his establishment and asks if there is anything he can provide. Orf, his face a stern mask, cuts through the flattery. He states that after some consideration, he will gratefully accept the branch manager's zealous offer. He elaborates, explaining that they have come on an inspection. Rumors have reached them, he says, that the branch manager's department has been mired in machinations. The manager's smile tightens as he listens, his eyes narrowing slightly. The manager feigns shock, clutching his chest dramatically. "Oh my, such strong words," he exclaims. Orf remains unmoved, adding that he could only view the situation as a setup against him. He continues, listing the guild's transgressions, arbitrary interpretation of the association statutes, abuse of the compulsory request system, and falsification of official hunting records. He concludes by stating that he has not erred in his assessment of the emergency monster situations. The branch manager maintains his composure, claiming he was simply fulfilling his duties as the branch head in accordance with the charter. He feigns confusion, stating he cannot recall anything that would warrant such accusations. With a placating smile, he suggests that it would be wrong to abuse one's heightened sense of justice, subtly implying that Orf is the one who is mistaken. He continues his calm lecture to Orf, his expression unyielding. He posits that not everyone around them is a sinner, but that atoning for one's sins is the most important duty of any sinner. He frames this not as a choice, but as a law, asserting that no debt can be ignored. Orf listens, his own face a mask of calm resolve. The branch manager's words seem to trigger a memory of another time, another vow. He recalls questioning a young knight about an oath she had taken. She stood before him, clutching a small box, her expression uncertain as he inquired about the vow she was making. His thoughts then shift to the very evidence Orf presented. He holds the documents, recalling them as proof from a single hunter, pages testifying to his alleged abuse of power. The memory is tied to the party that provided this proof. Kurando, Akari, the snow leopard Yukishiro, and another warrior, trekking through a harsh, rocky landscape. The leopard, Yukishiro, had moved with incredible speed, a blur of white and black against the desolate terrain. As they stood upon a rocky outcrop, one of them pointed towards the distance, announcing that their destination was just over the next ridge. The party paused, taking in the vast, unforgiving landscape before them. The proximity to their goal did not bring relief, but a wave of fear that washed over Akari. Her eyes widened in terror, and she instinctively grabbed onto her companion's cloak for support. The other warrior looked down, her own expression hardening with resolve. Akari was not the only one affected. Kurando's gaze sharpened, his eyes reflecting the immense pressure and danger of their situation. With their nerves frayed, the small party pressed on, traversing a precarious ridge high in the Alerpkian mountains. Unseen by them, the massive tail of a colossal creature slithered over a nearby peak, a silent, monstrous observer of their journey. A war of annihilation rages across the forested land. Countless armored soldiers are locked in a desperate, chaotic battle against a horde of monstrous beasts. There forms a whirlwind of claws and fury. In the aftermath, the mountain itself seems to perish. Amidst the splintered trees and scorched earth, a great beast lies slain. A voice observes the devastation, calling it a squall of monsters, a tide of darkness with no guiding light to be found. Surveying this destruction from a high ridge are Kurando, Akari, another female warrior, and the great leopard Yukishiro. The light-haired warrior speaks with grim certainty, stating that the mountain, and they along with it, are facing death. She warns that with every step they take into this onslaught, their chances of survival diminish. Akari turns to Kurando, her expression fraught with worry. She points out that their path to the city is cut off and suggests that she and Yukishiro should flee. She believes that if it's just the two of them, escape would be easy. Kurando's gaze falls, his features hardening with resolve, as if recalling a past failure he cannot repeat. Beside him, Yukishiro lets out a low, rumbling snarl, sensing the shift in mood and preparing for a confrontation. Kurando quietly affirms his decision. He looks to his companions, stating that they have no choice but to meet the enemy here. He instructs the two women to inform the others at their camp and to retrieve only the most essential items from a nearby cave, then asks if they are certain they wish to proceed. The scene shifts to a different time or place. Kurando crouches before Yukishiro, asking the Great Cat not to grumble about a small task. In the background, the interior of a bustling guild hall is visible, filled with patrons. Inside that very hall, a large crowd of hunters has gathered. A voice addresses them from above, explaining that an official notice concerns every single one of them, and that it relates to the selfish demands of their prince. Among the crowd, the branch manager Yakov confers with the elf leader, Orf. Yakov remarks that a situation like this is unprecedented. Orf counters, questioning what can be said about the 10-star hunter they've burdened with this responsibility, and pointedly asks what is preventing him from acting now. Nearby, the warrior Elita speaks to the veteran Maxim. She reminds him that he, the leader of the White Spear, vouched for this person. She recalls that at first, everything went smoothly and the request was resolved within 4 days, leaving her to wonder what could possibly be so surprising now. Inside the guild hall, the branch manager, Yakov, was visibly distressed, lamenting what a blunder had been made. He questioned the elf, Orf, noting that due to the rapid processing, they had failed to properly log the hunter's journal. Orf calmly countered that there had been plenty of time for a written request, asking why one wasn't found. Yakov insisted no one would lie to the ministry, while another hunter pointed out that the only proof of the mission, the baggage, was also missing. He continued to spiral, wondering aloud if there was a problem with the token verification instrument itself, or perhaps if the hunter's token was faulty. A woman in the crowd interjected, stating that the token was perfectly valid. She had checked it herself and questioned who he thought she was. Losing his composure, Yakov shouted that it was he who created both the tokens and the verification tools. Beside him, Orf calmly affirmed this, stating, "For a minute there, I am the creator of the tokens and the verification instruments." Orf continued, assuring Yakov that there was no one more qualified in the world. He offered to inspect the magical recording device if it was truly malfunctioning, but advised that this was not what Yakov should be concerning himself with. As beads of sweat formed on Yakov's brow, Orf leaned closer, telling the branch manager that there was no need for him to be so hesitant. The scene shifts away from the tense guild hall to a vast, silent panorama of a snow-covered mountain range. Far away in those mountains, Kurando, Akari, and the great leopard Yukishiro have found refuge inside a rustic shelter, accompanied by a group of robed followers. Back in the city, Orf continued his line of questioning. He acknowledged that a series of strange occurrences had taken place, but asked Yakov if he truly believed it was all just a coincidence. A memory of the mission's details surfaced, a request from Baron Potapenko to gather Tremal herbs, a task far below the rank of the hunter assigned to it. Yakov explained that on that day, another employee was responsible, as he was reporting to Parliament. Orf pressed further, revealing that the mission rules were only clarified after the fact, and the request itself was a week old. He then posed the critical question: if this wasn't mere abuse of power, who was deliberately managing these affairs? He concludes that this was a mistake on the part of the association, an unfortunate turn of events that has led them to their final decision. Branch manager Yakov listens, his expression grim. Yakov stammers in disbelief. In response, the elf explains that there was an urgent request with a non-existent record and a witness from a branch who had never even been in contact with Baron Potapenko. Meanwhile, in the main hall, a man addresses the gathered hunters, explaining that Baron Potapenko has been notified and will provide testimony. He claims his subordinate remembers the Baron's request perfectly and went to see him immediately after speaking with the hunter in question. Back in the office, Orf states plainly that the Baron's request was logged as invalid. He tells a sweating Yakov that his subordinate overstepped his authority and betrayed his trust. The consequence of this failure echoes through the guild hall, where the assembled hunters demand a mandatory investigation into the extraordinary monster incident, questioning why one wasn't conducted in the first place. Far from the political turmoil, Kurando's party trudges through the harsh, snowy mountains. Akari Fudashiro, clutching a bundle, mutters that the situation is no joke. They soon find shelter in a small cave, a necessary but serious breach of their mission's protocol. Back at the guild, Yakov clenches his hands, his face a mask of anguish as the uproar from the hall below intensifies. The hunters shout in anger and confusion, demanding to know what is happening in their city and questioning if they are about to face a squall. The chaos continues to unfold. Orf questions a speechless Yakov. In the hall, Elita confronts Baron Potapenko directly, stating she saw the shield of the deranged ice spirit herself. The Baron feigns ignorance. Amidst the crowd, hunters question the mission's premise, a hunt based on stargazing that failed to locate its target mountain. The Baron then addresses the assembly, declaring that they received no report from any hunter named Kurando. Observing the scene, Orf understands the impulse to blame one another. He reflects that while bonds of blood and country are strong, they can become like a poison ivy, clinging too tightly. He contemplates his next move, wondering how to expose the hidden scars on each of their hearts. They raised their voice, declaring to the assembled hunters that to expose the villain and prove the fraudulent activities, they were prepared to shut down the entire branch indefinitely. Below them, branch manager Yakov's face contorted in disbelief and horror. Baron Potapenko had questioned their authority, dismissing their words as nonsense and stating they had no power there. Orf calmly corrected him, asserting that as the head of the followers of the moon goddess, they possessed the right to consult and instruct all employees of the association. The implication of this authority sent a wave of panic through the hunters. They realized that without high-ranking hunters, the city would be left defenseless against the magical beasts in the mountains. The city would be devoured. Monsters would flood the streets. This realization broke Yakov. He began to scream, denying everything and claiming he was only following orders to keep Kurando on 2-star missions. His denial turned to frantic rage as he ordered the hunters to obey him and seize Orf's group, calling them kidnappers. His tirade continued, his voice raw with fury. He accused them of framing him, calling them scum and bastards. He screamed at the ungrateful hunters, reminding them of who had always cleaned up their messes. The branch manager's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated desperation, his eyes wide and his mouth agape in a silent scream as his composure completely shattered. Through it all, Orf watched with a steady, unwavering gaze, their expression calm and analytical as they observed the man's total breakdown. Yakov finally collapsed to his knees, burying his face in his hands. He sobbed that he knew nothing, his authority and anger completely gone, replaced by pathetic despair as the hunters and Orf's followers looked on. Suddenly, the massive guild hall window exploded inward in a shower of glass and splintered wood. A huge, spotted feline form, the snow leopard Yukishiro, crashed through the opening and lunged directly at the broken man on the floor. The great beast landed squarely on Yakov, pinning him beneath its powerful paws. The hunters cried out in shock and confusion, questioning what this creature was. Amid the chaos, Orf's eyes widened in recognition, whispering the name, Yukishiro. The great beast's eyes, wide and intense, scanned the chaotic scene. A flicker of confusion crossed its mind as it tried to understand what had happened and why it was suddenly in this place. This sudden eruption of violence left Orf utterly stunned. His eyes widened in alarm. The serene composure he held just moments before completely shattered by the unexpected attack. An alarm bell rings urgently through a mountain town, its peal echoing off the peaks. Inside a crowded hall, the patrons stir in confusion. One man calls out to sound the alarm bell, while another questions if it's just the cold bell ringing, a note of disbelief in his voice. The sound is no false alarm. From a crumbling watchtower, a lookout screams a desperate warning down to the streets below. They are under attack by monsters. His cry is swallowed by the eruption of chaos. A massive horde of creatures swarms down from the mountains, flooding the town. Panic spreads like wildfire as citizens flee for their lives. From the quiet vantage of a second-story window, a dark-haired swordsman watches the pandemonium unfold. He turns his attention inward as a panicked messenger rushes to an elven leader, Orf. The man reports that terrifying monsters are descending like an avalanche and will breach the city walls in less than an hour. Orf's expression is grim as he confirms the news, stating that a squall of monsters has struck them. Their numbers are uncountable, and the mountains behind them are completely obscured by the horde. As if summoned by his words, a massive snow leopard crashes onto the roof outside, shattering the window beside him. Below, the gathered crowd screams and stumbles back in terror. Orf's face hardens with grim understanding. The great beast, Yukishiro, meets his gaze with a ferocious snarl, its eyes burning with intensity. Turning back to the frightened people, Orf attempts to restore order. He tells them to remain calm, acknowledging that the division heads are absent. As the high priestess and revered of the moon goddess, he declares he will take full responsibility for managing the Hunters division. His words do little to quell the despair. One man cries that the city is doomed, buried under the monstrous horde, while another wonders what they did to anger the gods, lamenting that their time has run out. He raises his voice, cutting through the panic with decisive commands. He orders the evacuation of all citizens through the city's safe exits and instructs the guild staff to identify the surrounding territories. He calls for volunteers to prepare for a confrontation outside the walls and urges everyone to gather any available weapons, seeking cooperation from the city's artisans. He implores them all to unite in the defense of their home. While Orf rallies the masses, the dark-haired swordsman stands with his own party in a separate room. Gathered around a table with his companions, a young mage and 2 female warriors, he looks up from a map and asks a single question, ready. His people confirm they are. He stood at the mouth of the mountain cave, reflecting on the terrible timing of the attack. He never would have imagined such a catastrophe occurring while a portion of their forces were away in the city. His thoughts were interrupted by the elven high priestess, Orf, who addressed her followers. She declared the crisis another test of their faith in the goddess. When one of them questioned her seriousness, Orf calmly replied that they had no choice but to accept reality, reassuring them that they were safe for now within the cave. He paid her words little mind, his gaze fixed on a fortified plateau in the distance. Orf noticed his focus, sensing he had anticipated the need for such a stronghold, just as its previous owner had. She continued to brief the group, explaining that a direct confrontation in the city was out of the question. Their strategy must be reactive, as the monsters were intelligent and the terrain favored them. Their only option, she insisted, was to barricade themselves and endure. One of the warriors scoffed, questioning the wisdom of a plan that involved no fight. This sentiment was shared by his companions. The veteran warrior grunted, and the young mage voiced her own concerns, speculating that the enemy would have archers, the most dangerous kind. She then added that her mace and the swordsman's shield proved they could fight with diverse weapons as well. Hearing this, Orf turned directly to the swordsman. Addressing him as Lord Kurando, she apologized for her forwardness before formally requesting his participation in the battle. She assured him that others would fight by his side, while those skilled in holy magic would provide support from the rear. He considered her request, thinking it was a heavy burden for a mere hunter. He concluded that Orf had misjudged his capabilities. At that moment, Orf quietly remarked to her companion, Diansha, that the man was an unskilled warrior. Diansha affirmed this, adding that his race, the crystal folk, was strong in earth magic, but critically weak to fire. Kurando was stunned that she knew his people's secret. As this tense exchange occurred, the catgirl Mana casually licked her fingers, remarking that the moon goddess was very strict with her apostles. Below them, the town was a hive of activity, with citizens evacuating and horses being prepared for battle. The streets below were a torrent of humanity. Families with fearful expressions rushed past, carrying whatever belongings they could manage, their hurried steps echoing the town's collective panic. A long, somber procession of refugees streamed out from the main gate, heading for the wilderness. From the stone battlements above, guards kept a grim watch over the exodus, their forms stark against the mountainous backdrop. As the evacuation continues elsewhere, the designated defenders gather in a vast, crystalline cavern. Kurando raises a hand, and with a surge of power, the very earth rises to seal the cave entrance behind them. One of his companions, the wavy-haired warrior, remarks that such a display of power is excessive for one person, but she is glad for it. He finishes the barrier, his gaze fixed on the path forward. From the snowy darkness, the colossal form of the snow leopard Yukishiro emerges, padding silently to stand beside him, a powerful ally ready for the coming battle. Diansha watches him, silently acknowledging that his magical power is comparable to that of a magical beast. Kurando, lost in his own thoughts, adjusts his gauntlet. He has strived for so long not to disappoint her. This outcome feels right. With their path secured, the group prepares to move out. Meanwhile, back in the city, a massive crowd of armed citizens and hunters has gathered before a large manor. From a balcony above, Orf addresses the anxious assembly. After calling for silence, she looks down upon them with grim gravity and announces that they are all facing the threat of a squall of monsters. A woman with an authoritative air steps forward, reporting that a total of 250 hunters, guards, and armed citizens have volunteered for the defense. Orf then speaks again, her voice ringing with conviction. She concedes that the monsters are dangerous and cannot be stopped, but declares that they have an answer, the strongest warriors among them. She begins to introduce these champions to the crowd below. First, she names the veteran warrior, Maximdal. Then, the formidable Alita Haggett. Her introductions continue, presenting Erika Kuretani of the Scarlet Snow and Hayato Ichira, the hero of the Arbom Nation, from the Wings of Night. Next, she calls out two more powerful figures, Fawn of the White Claw and Kazan Sasaki, the ruler of 100 Blades. Finally, she presents the last of the chosen defenders, Alice Kingstown, the Storm Princess, and the enigmatic Fuo of the Shadow Blade. With the introductions complete, Orf turns her back to the 9 champions and spreads her arms to the sky. She declares to the crowd that by a fortunate coincidence, 9 of the strongest hunters have visited their city. The gods, she proclaims with soaring confidence, truly favor them. His voice rings out over the assembled crowd, filled with conviction. He proclaims that this gathering is not mere luck, but a true miracle, and with this strength, they can be victorious. His words ignite the hearts of the defenders. Cries rise from the crowd, each person shouting their reason to fight, for their friends, for their families, for themselves, and for the fate of their entire city. Their individual voices merge into a single, deafening war cry that shakes the very foundations of the city. The massive army raises its weapons, united in a single promise, victory. As the city's defenders prepared for the siege, another group stood watch on a desolate, snowy ridge. Kurando, flanked by the young mage, and Alita, gazed down at the valley below. Before them, a living tide of darkness surged forward. The monster squall had arrived. Before a grotesque horde of monsters, Erika Kuretani stands firm, her sword raised. She announces that her power stems from the teachings of her order's head priestess, challenging the creatures to experience the might of a handmaiden of the moon goddess and tremble before her magic. She then unleashes her spell, Tremor of the Firmament. The very ground beneath the monster army cracks and shatters in massive concentric circles, throwing the horde into disarray as the robed followers watch from safe distance. As the chaos spreads, Kurando identifies her technique as large-scale spirit magic. Erika explains that while such magic requires a foundation, A caster whose will overwhelms their target can effectively rewrite the laws of nature itself. The disruption causes the monsters to turn on one another in a frenzy of confusion. Seeing the opportunity created by her spell, Erica raises a hand and shouts for the archers to make ready. However, before her order can be carried out, Mana leaps into action. Her extra arms sprout from her back as she unleashes a torrent of fire, shouting the name of her spell. Her face twists into a mask of manic glee, her eyes wide with destructive joy. She cackles wildly, screaming for the horde to burn and turn to ash, leaving Kurando and Erica stunned by her terrifying ferocity. From a nearby hilltop, the silhouettes of the defenders, Maxim, Kurando, Orf, Erica, and the small mage, stand watching as Mana leaps gleefully into the inferno she created. The firestorm consumes the monstrous army, their forms writhing and melting within the flames. An unseen observer can only think to themselves what a terrifyingly crazy arsonist she is. Atop the stone battlements of a nearby fortress, archers draw their bows, taking aim. On the ramparts above them, the leaders, Maxim Dahl, Kurando, Orf, and Erica, gather to oversee the battle. The guild mistress steps forward among them, her expression severe. Raising a hand, she issues a sharp command to all the archers below, fire from the ramparts. The archers loose their volley in unison, a dark cloud of arrows soaring towards the encroaching enemy. Each shaft, imbued with potent magic, found its mark within the teeming horde. Explosions of light erupted across the battlefield, tearing through the monstrous ranks and leaving trails of destruction as the creatures shrieked and fell. As the first wave of arrows rained down, a second was already being prepared, darkening the sky once more in a testament to the defenders' disciplined assault. Despite their efforts, the sheer force of the horde's assault caused the ancient stone walls to tremble violently. Amidst the shaking, Erica urged Ari to heed Orf's words. The elven leader noted grimly that their defensive barrier was old and insufficient. Kurando then interjected, asking for a moment's patience, as the high priestess had arrived. His announcement hung in the air as Erica considered the grim reality of their situation. She knew these undead soldiers could only be returned to the light by the life force of the living. A shared resolve settled over the group as one of them declared they would handle the threat themselves. As they steeled themselves, Mana's voice cut through the tension, asking for Hayato's whereabouts. Kurando ignored her, his gaze fixed on the battle below. He mused that the wall's defense was now in the hands of the High Priestess of the Moon, but a deeper concern weighed on him. He debated whether to reveal what he knew about the Apostle of Heresy. Before he could decide, a new presence made itself known. From a high vantage point, the elf leader Orf was hailed by his followers. They cried out his title, Orf of the Elven Purple Flame, and chanted for the all-consuming flame. From the ramparts, Kurando observed the scene unfold. In response to their call, an immense power was unleashed. A colossal ring of purple fire erupted, encircling the entire town in a protective, blazing wall. Kurando stood before the inferno, a dark silhouette against the overwhelming light. Down in the streets, the townsfolk stared up at the spectacle, their faces a mixture of terror and disbelief. With the town secured by the fiery barrier, he prepared to enter the fray himself. He reached over his shoulders, his hands closing around the hilts of two enormous swords, and drew the twin blades with a smooth, powerful motion. The sight of the warrior preparing for battle brought forth a memory, a vision of a different time and place. A figure stood poised at the threshold of a brightly lit doorway. The same man, yet different, clad not in a warrior's dark coat, but in the simple attire of another life. He stands ready as the other defenders brace for the next assault. Erica Kiritani turns to the exhausted cat girl, Mana, urging her to take a moment to rest and recover her magical energy. Another warrior bellows for everyone to attack with everything they have, trusting that the good spirits will aid them. In response to the command, a new wave of spiked, rolling creatures charges from the horde. They crash into the defenders' front line with devastating, explosive force, sending bodies flying amidst the chaos. The immediate threat is neutralized. Kurando observes the now-still forms of the spiked monsters, noting to himself that the defensive effort was more effective than he had anticipated. But the brief respite is shattered by a low, guttural groan from the main horde. The grotesque mass of creatures writhes and shifts, their collective agony echoing across the battlefield. As the horde stirs, a vision of 5 figures, a swordsman, a powerful warrior, a small mage, a cat girl, and another warrior, flashes through his mind. The memory is cut short as Erica approaches him. She identifies her specialty as earth spirit magic and asks for his assistance with an enchantment, to which he agrees. Meanwhile, the full weight of the monster horde presses against Orf's ring of fire, the flames holding back the seemingly endless tide of undead flesh. Inside the barrier, the defenders regroup behind a line of the defeated spiked creatures, now repurposed as a defensive barricade. Maxim Dahl gives a nod of acknowledgement as the plan is set. Suddenly, the spiked creatures before them begin to hum with energy, startling Kurando as they activate under Erica's influence. Their attention is violently wrenched away as the horde itself begins to transform. Countless bodies melt and fuse together, rising into a colossal, horrifying titan of flesh and bone that towers over the battlefield, its monstrous form dripping with ichor.